Now, I'd like to start the intentional workshop, Global History through Technological Transition. This workshop is held by the collaboration of two intentional projects, NARA to NORWICH of SISJAC, UK, and Materia-Mind of JSPS. Firstly, we ask for the opening remark to Professor Matsumoto from LIDIC, Okayama University, on behalf of Materia-Mind. Okay, Professor Matsumoto, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today for the International Joint Workshop, Global History Through Technological Traditions. The workshop is held in collaboration between two projects, Materia-Mind and NARA to NORWICH. Materia-Mind is an interdisciplinary research project which investigates the mechanism of co-creation between material and mind. The Sainsbury Institute's NARA to NORWICH project explores how material, culture, and religion were transmitted to NARA, Japan, and Norwich, England. I want to thank Simon Kainer, Executive Director of the Sainsbury Institute, and Hideyuki Onishi, PI of the research group B1, the Materia-Mind project, for their effort from the planning stage to the realization of the event. Sorry. I thank Susan Whitfield from the Sainsbury Institute and Pauline Coste from Sorbonne University, France, and John Ljungkvist from Uppsala University, Sweden, for coming all the way to Okayama for the workshop. I also thank Tomomi Tamura from NARA NARA National Research Institute for Cultural Properties, and Kazunobu Ikeya from the National Museum of Ethnology, Japan, for contributing to the workshop. And of course, Joseph Ryan, an indispensable member of Materia-Mind project. I'm very excited to have this fantastic opportunity to discuss how the objects and technological traditions have shaped history, local cultures, and the people who live there. As the principal investigator of the Materia-Mind project, I would like to start by introducing our perspective. This project, funded by the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, which is JSPS, is a 5-year endeavor from the fiscal year 2024. Well, large and complex social organization, advanced science and technology, and the formation of civilizations with diverse religious beliefs, including world religions, are among the unique characteristics of humanity. These changes continue to expand qualitatively and quantitatively today. It is necessary to identify how civilizations developed to understand why this uniquely human evolution occurred and how we got to where we are today. In other words, we need to know how, after the emergence of Homo sapiens, nomadic hunter-gatherer life gave way to sedentary life and ultimately to the formation of complex societies that support a variety of artificial tools and environments. We posit that understanding the inseparable nature of material and mind is the key. We want to clarify how people have created objects and how objects have created people. The Materia-Mind project is a testament to the power of interdisciplinary collaboration. It brings together a diverse range of humanities and natural sciences disciplines in each contributing unique insights to understanding of the mechanisms behind human niche construction and changes in cognition, body, and behavior. This multidisciplinary approach is essential to our goal of presenting a new model for understanding our past and illuminating our future. To achieve this rather grand goal, we have 6 research groups. The project team includes many disciplines such as anthropology, geoscience, social psychology, genetics, brain science, cognitive science, and biology. Among them, archaeology, which deals with long-term history, plays a vital role. Understanding the mechanism of the material-mind co-creation is at the core of our project, and archaeological evidence is indispensable for it. Thus, today's workshop, Global History Through Cultural Traditions, is crucial to achieving this understanding. It will provide an international forum for discussion on this issue. Collaboration with the NARA to NORWICH project will give us a broad spatial perspective spanning the Eurasian continent, significantly advancing our research. Animals, other than humans, live in the bodies they are born with. On the other hand, the emergence of body ornaments in the Paleolithic period is a crucial turning point in human history. It is the first clear evidence that objects and bodies came to be integrated to create an individual existence and identity. The presentations by Pauline Coste, John Ljungkvist, and Kazunobu Ikeya will provide valuable insights into how beads and ornaments have shaped people and society. Susan Whitfield and Tomomi Tamura's talks will give a basis for thinking about how glass, which is a new material created by humans in the process of the formation of civilizations, has changed the mode of bead production, regional exchange, social development, and also the sense of beauty. Joseph Ryan will discuss his latest research findings on iron, a newly created material believed to have changed the direction of human history. We hope this workshop will lead to many new findings and questions to be pursued, and will be the start of further collaborations between the 2 projects. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the Professor Matsumoto. Next, we ask an examination of the purpose of this project and workshop to Professor Simon Kena from SISJAC and University of East Anglia. On behalf of NARA to NORWICH, please go ahead.
Well, so I'm Simon Kena from the Sainsbury Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Cultures and the University of East Anglia in Norwich. And I want to start by saying a huge thank you to Professor Matsumoto Naoko, Professor Onishi Hideyuki for the very kind invitation to come to OKAYAMA today with my colleagues from our NARA to Norwich project to explore synergies between our initiative and the Materia-Mind project. I believe, Onishi-sensei, it's just over a year ago that you came to Norwich and introduced the Materia-Mind project to us. And it was at that time that we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to see if we could bring our 2 projects together for a workshop just to present some of the ideas that we're working on. It's particularly timely for me, as I will show. I've just got a few pictures to show you, because in our project, we are at a key moment of moving from our initial phase, which led to this exhibition, an online exhibition called NARA to Norwich. And our initial project was called NARA to Norwich, Art and Belief at the Ends of the Silk Roads. And we were able to complete our online exhibition last autumn. And we're now just in the process of moving to a new phase of our research. And so in terms of timing, for me, the main objective of this workshop is to see how some of the questions which we are asking through our NARA to Norwich project may be of interest to colleagues working with the Materia-Mind project. And it's been great for me to think about over the last few months to think where those synergies may lie. I'd like to begin by thanking the Toshiba International Foundation, who have very generously funded our NARA to Norwich project since 2018, and they are continuing to fund it into its second phase. And without their very generous support, we wouldn't be able to do this at all. I would encourage you to visit www.naratonorwich.org and explore the online exhibition that we've got there. There's a number of themes, which I'm not going to go into, just one or two of the themes I'm going to pick up today. So the Materia-Mind project, what immediately interested me here was the interdisciplinary nature of this very ambitious program, and also the ways in which Professor Matsumoto is leading new thinking on the relationship between the evolution of human beings and the material world. And I'm also an archaeologist, and of course, as archaeologists, this is absolutely central to what we do. Understanding interpreting those material traces of human behavior to understand the development of human behavior altogether. And I think there are some really nice synergies, some connecting points between our two projects that I hope we'll be able to explore in the course of this afternoon's workshop. Some of you may not be familiar with my institute, the Sainsbury Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Culture, so I thought I'd just show a couple of pictures to introduce this and explain why our NARA to Norwich project has become one of the biggest projects which we've run in the 25-year history of our institute. Our mission is to undertake and disseminate what we like to think of as world-class research into all aspects of Japanese arts and cultures from prehistory to the present day. And I guess we're particularly interested in looking at the ways in which aspects of the past are picked up in contemporary Japan, and then the global significance that those aspects have. We are based in the city of Norwich, and you can see there's a map of England here. Norwich is the easternmost city in England, and I always like to think that that means that we are, in fact, the English city geographically closest to Japan. And we're about 2 hours outside London. So in many ways, I think in terms of scale, we're perhaps comparable to OKAYAMA, perhaps in terms of population. It's a very ancient city. It was the second city of England in the medieval period. And my institute, which is this red brick building that you can see here, is right next door to Norwich Cathedral, which is a 11th century, 12th century establishment. And our NARA to Norwich project has allowed us to work with our friends in Norwich Cathedral to explore issues around religion and the role that religion plays in the transmission of material culture, the impact it has on art, and also the other way around, the role that new art forms, the role that new technologies have on religions. And we've become very aware as part of our NARA to Norwich project that materials such as gold or incense or paper or iron played a really significant role in the spread of these new religions. And I know that my colleague, Professor Susan Whitfield, is going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. Now, why is the Sainsbury Institute, this research institute for Japanese arts and cultures, why are we in Norwich? Well, about 50 years ago, Sir Robert and Lady Lisa Sainsbury, who Sir Robert Sainsbury was the chairman of one of the biggest supermarket chains in the UK. And I know that Professor Matsumoto, I think, has been shopping in Sainsbury supermarkets on many occasions. A little tiny bit of the profit from those supermarkets went into building up an absolutely astonishing art collection, which was gifted to the University of East Anglia about 50 years ago. And the Sainsburys also built an art museum, the Sainsbury Centre for Visual Arts, and that houses their collections for the university. The Sainsburys were very eclectic in their collecting, and they were particularly interested in the impact that what we recognize as world art had on what was for them contemporary European art. And indeed, it's often said that there would be no modern European art had it not been for the encounter with Japanese art in particular. As part of the collections, there's some very fine early Buddhist and early Shinto artworks. And we have used our NARA to Norwich project as a way of engaging with researchers here in Japan to look more deeply at some of the artworks that we're lucky enough to have in Norwich. And that's why the Sainsbury Institute is there as well. So our NARA to Norwich project started with this object in the middle, which is described as an Asuka period head of a bodhisattva. And it's one of the real treasures that we have in the Sainsbury Centre. We think it's perhaps, if it's real, it's probably 7th or early 8th century and influenced by influenced by Korea and China very much. And part of our NARA to Norwich project has been trying to situate what happens in Japan in the ancient period, very much in its East Asian setting. And we also wanted to compare it with what was happening in early medieval England and the early medieval period around the North Sea. Because from this period, the sort of 5th through to the 10th centuries of the Common Era, of course, Buddhism is arriving in Japan, Shinto is coalescing around that. At the other end of the Silk Roads, around the North Sea, Christianity is the new force which is coming in. We're not looking at this from a religious perspective. We're looking at this from an archaeological, anthropological, and art historical perspective to try and understand the role that religion might have been playing in these contacts and communications at the extremities of the Silk Roads, areas which are often not specifically included in studies of the Silk Road traditionally. So we've been pleased in the impact that has already had. So our NARA to Norwich project began in the autumn of 2017, and we organized a workshop in Norwich, and indeed we were delighted to welcome Professor Joseph Ryan and other colleagues from Japan and Korea to come to Norwich, and we sort of set out what we would like to do. And the project has grown organically since then, I think it would be fair to say. We ran a special session at the Society for East Asian Archaeology in Nanjing, which of course is the great Tang capital of Chang'an. It was rather wonderful to be able to run a session there in 2018. And then we've had a series of international workshops that have taken us to Sweden, to Istanbul, to NARA, to Seoul and Gyeongju in Korea. And we're in the process of developing a new dimension of this to look at Japan and the maritime Silk Roads rather than looking specifically at the terrestrial Silk Roads. And this will take us to India and Sri Lanka next year. And we're looking at more connections around that. Along the way, we've made some wonderful new friends, including our colleagues at the University of Uppsala. And it's particularly wonderful to have with us Dr. John Ljungkvist, who's a great specialist on the Vendel period, the period immediately before what we recognize as the Viking period, and then the Viking period, early medieval Scandinavia. I was giving a talk at a session at the Society for American Archaeology, and there was a group at the back of the room who introduced themselves as being very interested in the Vikings and being really intrigued by what we were doing with NARA to Norwich. And that has turned into a really beautiful set of collaborations with first something called the Viking Phenomenon, a major project housed at the University of Uppsala led by Professor Neil Price. Now a research environment called The World in the Viking Age. And we've been delighted that John and his colleagues have been very interested in exploring early medieval Scandinavian contacts to the east. And so this is how our collaborations have been working on that front. I think we were all particularly pleased last year. There were two major exhibitions in London on themes relating to the Silk Roads. There was one at the British Museum, the Silk Roads exhibition, and there was one at the British Library on the Dunhuang collections that are held there. And we were able to take along some of our colleagues from our NARA to Norwich project. And we had been speaking to the curators at the British Museum right from the beginning of their conceptualization of the exhibition. And we were thrilled that they started their exhibition in Japan with some of the materials that we had been studying. And so we felt that in many ways, our initial purpose of exploring the significance of the Silk Roads in those extremity areas in Korea and Japan and around the North Sea had already been picked up by the British Museum. So we feel that's a nice impact of our project to date. And they also covered Sutton Hoo and some of the early medieval English archaeology, which we had been looking at as well. So that was very pleasing, very satisfying. Another set of friends that we made along the way are the priests from the Hasedera temple in Nara. And I don't know if many of you, I'm sure many of you have been to Hasedera. If you haven't, do go visit. It is one of the most beautiful spots one can imagine. And this is our new stage, and a further new stage of our project, investigating the role of pilgrimage and the ways that pilgrimage functioned to help transmit ideas and encouraged people to encounter new things, new materials, new people, and new ideas. And this seems to me to speak directly to the Materia-Mind project and some of the ideas around that. We like to adopt a kind of experiential dimension to our work. And so we're actually going to be following the pilgrimage route from Hasedera. And the priests came to Norwich last year. We had some wonderful things with music and shared interests. We're going to be following in the footprints of some very famous Chinese and Japanese pilgrims. And we're going to walk the pilgrimage route from Hasedera to the Ise Grand Shrine, probably in 2026 or 2027. The timing of this is nice because it's the 1300th anniversary of the foundation of Hasedera. And alongside that, building on our approach of comparative archaeology, we're also going to be following what was the second most important pilgrimage route in medieval England, which runs from our own city of Norwich to the great medieval pilgrimage centre of Walsingham in the North Norfolk countryside, which is at the centre of a very ancient sacred landscape. And we're developing ideas around this, and it would be wonderful if we can think of ways that we could develop synergies with Materia-Mind about that. And just to finish off, we've got two exhibition projects which we're also working towards. One is going to be at Sutton Hoo, which is the most important early medieval royal burial that we have in England, a famous ship burial mounds dating to the late 7th, early 8th century in East Anglia, about an hour from Norwich. And next year, we're going to be bringing materials from a contemporary tomb, the Fujinoki tomb, to put on display at Sutton Hoo. And we hope to use this as a way of developing interest in the comparative spread of new technologies, and particularly metalworking and ironworking. And then our second new exhibition project is looking at the maritime Silk Roads. I was delighted with this map. It's the first map I found that suggests that the maritime Silk Roads actually start in Kamchatka and then come down past Korea and Japan. And we're going to be doing some work with the sacred island of Okinoshima, which is now a World Heritage Site. And I've been involved in that since 2006. And we're hoping to bring some of the important objects from Okinoshima in 2027 to the National Maritime Museum, where they've not worked a lot on Japan to date. This is in Greenwich, fabulous museum. And we'd very much like to be looking at the cognitive archaeology of maritime technologies as part of this project. And again, I'm hoping that there may be synergies there with the Materia-Mind project as well. So once again, thank you very much indeed for creating this opportunity for us. We very much hope that this is just the beginning of what we're hoping is going to be a very fruitful set of discussions over the next few years. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for the explanation, and Professor Kellner. And after this, we would like to proceed with the presentations. The first presentation is titled Technological Transmission on the Silk Road, Function and Aesthetics in the Spread of Glass by Professor Susan Whitfield from SISJAC and University of East Anglia.
None of you could hear that. I was just passing on my thanks. I was saying I'm going to be telling a very complex story today, and in half an hour, it's very difficult to go into all the details, but I'm very happy if any of you are interested to send on bibliographies and other, and other supporting materials. Are we okay? Yeah, okay. Right. Thank you very much. So I'm delighted also to tell this story because I think it fits in very well with the Materia-Mind project, because what I'm interested in is I'm a historian of the Silk Road, and obviously a bit later than some of our colleagues here, but I've always been interested how materials spread and technologies spread along the Silk Road. And sometimes having the materials and having the technology is not enough. The movement and the adoption of new materials, of new objects by human societies is also born of a need and a desire by those societies for these new objects. And I think the story of glass in China, in the North China Plains, the civilizations of China, very much exemplifies that. So that's the story I'm going to be exploring today. There we go. Yeah. Right, as my colleague said, we've been working on this project with NARA to NORWICH, and there is a glass story which tells some of this on that site. So you can go and look at that. Now, so I'm going to look at glass, the availability of materials, technical knowledge, functionality and utility, desire, aesthetics as it spreads along the Silk Road into China. Glass, as we know, and I don't need to tell most of you here, is a very ancient material, probably 3,500 BC. Humans started making glass, even though it's complex in some ways. As you probably know, to melt sand, to melt silica, it requires a very, very high kiln temperature. And so you add alkaline to the kiln, to the sand to reduce the melting point. But then you have to add something like lime to it to make it harder again. So you have soda lime glass, which is the basic glass that we see throughout the ancient world, made in ancient Egypt, as said, and West Asia 3,500 years ago. And this is a kiln in the Lebanon being used today, but in an area where glass has been made from earliest times in very much the same way. Now, glass, of course, is a two-stage process. You melt the sand with these various other materials and you make raw glass, and then you melt it again and blow it or form it, molds to make a finished product or make glass inlays or glass or other glass objects. And in order, you might add also materials like cobalt ores or copper oxide to color the glass for different purposes. And what we see from very early on, actually, sorry, can I just turn this into, because I'm not getting the, sorry, I'm just going to switch the, it's not in presentation mode, so I'm not getting the, yeah. Sorry about this. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, so look. Apologies for this, I'm just not using my computer, so. Yeah, okay, thank you. But so we see glass being produced in West Asia and North Africa from very early times. But we see from very earliest times also stone, blue stone, being brought from the lapis mines, lapis lazuli, in Badakhshan and what is now Eastern Afghanistan. Over 4,000 miles being traded to North Africa. You know, I work on the Silk Roads and people often say that the Silk Roads is start of Afro-Eurasian trade. Well, of course it's not. Ever since humans have existed, they've been trading long distances as well. And the Mask of Tutankhamun from, the end of the second millennium BC is a great example of this because it has lapis from the mines in Afghanistan and many other objects. And this clearly became an aesthetic of ancient Egypt, this deep blue. But lapis was clearly rare and expensive. And so also in the Mask of Tutankhamun, we see blue glass, which is being made to replicate glass, lapis, a more expensive material. And so we see glass functioning very much as a replica substitute for another material. And this glass was made on the shores of the Mediterranean, and the beads, the place it was made, and both inlays for the mask, but also beads like this, are found at the same time pretty much in graves in Denmark. So we also see glass trade going on to Northern Europe at this very early period, way before the Silk Roads. And this is often seen as a creation of a blue aesthetic for this very rich lapis blue. And glass, indeed, ingots we know traveled by both land and sea. These are ingots with colored with cobalt, found in the Ulubrun shipwreck, which was just off the shores of Turkey in the Mediterranean. And again, showing this network of trade. But this network of trade extends further east as well. We see in Hami, in a place in the eastern Tarim Basin, just on the borders of the route to the North China Plains, sort of in Eastern Central Asia, a bead which also comes from these production centers in West Asia. So we're seeing the movement into the routes into East Asia. And indeed, the bead we see during the middle of the first millennium BC, and by the start of the second millennium BC, we're seeing these blue beads also from the same source in Japan. Now, I'm not a technical person, but just quickly to say the way these beads are identified, the source of these beads is, of course, through scientific analysis. And they're neutron beads. The soda used is natron, which is found in North Africa at places called Wadi Natron, which is in the middle of the desert, but it's a place where these deposits of natron were found, which were used in glass making and has its own particular distinctive profile so it can easily be recognized. So we see glass from before the Silk Road moving also into, as said, more Central and then East Asia at the start of the Silk Road, this deep blue. But as you can see from the Japanese glass beads on the right, there's two beads that are more of a greeny yellow color. And this, of course, represents another ascetic, which is the jade ascetic, which is very much part of the story. And jade, the main source of jade at this time was Khotan in the southern Taklamakan, just in Eastern Central Asia, where that green dot is. And we see jade being transported from this place 4,000 miles eastward to the plains, the cultures of the plains of northern China at that time, such as the Shang culture, as we can see in this lovely little elephant in the tomb of Lady Fu Hao from the Shang period. And a lot of scholars see very much a very much ascetic distinction, the blue from Central Asia westward and this green jade from Central Asia eastward. Now, jade is more complex story because unlike lapis, where there's one major source, there are other smaller sources, but the major source remains today in Badakhshan in East, and it continues to be mined there. There are other sources of jade, and jade can come, of course, from both nephrite and from jadeite. For example, in northern Italy, we get jadeite mines, and we see the polished stone axe heads, jadeite axe heads. This is one found near London from the second millennium. And at the other end, we can see, I can't see, it's cut off my thing, yes, we get jadeite deposits, of course, in Japan as well, and also making axe heads from this very early period. So two very similar ascetics, no connection between them, but coming out, getting ascetic and for this, with the same material and making the same sorts of objects out of it. Very much part of this human interaction with new materials. And we also, apart from these jadeite deposits, we get nephrite deposits in Taiwan, and these are to form nephrite beads are produced, such as producing this jade necklace that we see, but these are to form a network, a maritime network, again, quite early from Taiwan into South and Southeast Asia, which, and objects like this were traded across this network and found in the Philippines and Vietnam today. So we can see this jade ascetic spreading. And at the same time, of course, we get jadeite magatamas. These are 2nd to 1st century BC being produced from Japanese jadeite. So although there's this ascetic, it's a seemingly ascetic divide, the blue does move across in some ways. So we've already seen the blue bead in Hami, but we get blue beads like this from Wadi Natron, from northern Egypt, West Asia, in China and in Japan, from the end of the 1st millennium, middle of the 1st millennium BC, through to the 1st, 2nd centuries AD. Now, the story then starts getting more complicated in the Silk Road period because we get, of course, lots of production centers of glass in India and South Asia and Central Asia, and some of these centers are shown on this map here. And so we get glass going by maritime and land routes, both eastwards and westwards, and producing material which is found across these regions. So at Bizil, Khotan, at a site called Bizili in Khotien, the place we just talked about, where jade is produced, has been found many, many beads, and most of them actually are produced in Central Asia and what is now Pakistan. So we're seeing other beads coming from elsewhere. And at a site called Shengjindian, which is again, near Turfan and in the northern Tarim Basin, Several hundred beads have been found in tombs there, and you can see they range in all different colors and types, and they're sourced from Central Asia, from India, and from West Asia. So we're seeing already a network of beads across much of this Afro-Eurasian continent. Now you can see that some of them are clearly going with the green, the jade aesthetic, and some of them are going with the blue aesthetic. But what's interesting about these beads, another thing that's interesting about them, is that they're not all soda lime. Soda lime, as I said, is the sort of glass you got made in West Asia, North Africa. Some of these are potash lime beads, and some of them are lead barium beads. And these are two new materials that come in around this time, very much showing the movement of the materials across the Silk Road. So it becomes a much more complicated story. And this place, Jintian, is right in the center of this story. So we're seeing a whole mixture of aesthetics and materials going along here. Now, these are witherite deposits of barium deposits that we see in China. And of course, China, by the start of the Silk Road, and this is the borders of China today, which wasn't China then, but by the time of the Silk Road, had great expertise in making glazes for pottery. And they use these other materials, not soda lime, but lead and barium for glazes. And so naturally, when they came into contact with glass and came to reproduce glass, they used the technologies and materials that were most familiar perhaps to them. And so we don't really get soda lime glass in China. We get lead barium and potash glass from this period. And you can see here that potash lime is found from very early. It's a rather strange diagram because it goes from right to left, but you can see. And then lead barium lasts for a small period, just from the end of the first millennium BC and into the beginning of the first millennium AD. You get this lead barium glass, and then it goes to potash lead and potash lime glass after that throughout Chinese history. Now, when you study Chinese history and Chinese art, I'm not sure, you come across groups of materials such as bronzes, such as ceramics, which are key to the story of Chinese art. Glass doesn't figure among them. Glass is always a sort of semi-outsider in the story of Chinese art. And said that if we look at the reasons for adopting a new material and new objects, there's the availability of the materials, the technical knowledge, but also whether it has a function, its use, and the desire. And certainly there are availability of materials. Making glazes uses many of the same materials. Making high-fired ceramics, which you have high-fired stoneware at this time, have very good kiln technology, so there's no problem in the technical knowledge. But when it comes to the functionality and the utility and the desire and aesthetics, I think then it becomes much more interesting. So what we see is by land, these little blue beads coming and setting off glass making in China. But we also see by sea, at the start of the Silk Roads period, this is a piece, late Hellenistic piece that you see in the bottom, glass bowl made on the Mediterranean from the 1st century BC. We see at this time, this aesthetic coming in, these objects, bowls coming into this is found in a grave in Guangdong, in what is now southern China, but Vietnam, Nam Viet, as was then. And this seems to trigger this new object coming in, local glass making of similar objects. And so this is what the bowl would look like when it was excavated. Several of these were found in a tomb, as said, in Guangdong, on display now in various Chinese museums. It had been weathered, but originally very much like this piece, with a simple, very simple piece. And it seems to have triggered the rise of glass making of similar pieces. But again, you see immediately this difference. Instead of the blue aesthetic, we've got the green jade-like aesthetic. So if anything, this is replicating a jade bowl, which you get at that time. The other thing to be said is that by this time, lead was being used in these glass bowls to make replica glass bowls in China along the Tonkin Gulf, what is now Vietnam. And what lead does to glass is makes it translucent, but it also makes it liable to break if you put in hot liquids. And hot liquids were mainly drunk in China rather than cold liquids. So immediately you're thinking of the utility of it, you pour in, can't use it as a drinking vessel. And in fact, why indeed would you need to use it as a drinking vessel? Now, glass had originally taken hold, many argue, in West Asia, because up until then, metal was used for drinking and eating. Metal is not inert. If you drink wine from metal ewer like this, Roman ewer showing the Trojan Wars, it gives a taste to the wine. So it's very beautiful, but it has limitations. And so glass ewers and glass vessels came in, which were inert, and so they became adopted because apart from their aesthetic pleasure, the point of view of aesthetics, they also had a function which filled a gap, if you like, in that world. And the ewers like this moved into Sasanian Persia, where they became very popular as well. But in China, they were replicated in ceramics, which was a material that Chinese cultures felt a lot more comfortable with. And ceramics like this, with their lead-based glazes, can hold liquid just as well as these silver ewers, and they don't give any taste to the liquid. And the cultures of China didn't just have ceramics, as we see in the top, their little ear bowls, drinking bowls. They also had jade, as we've discussed, and lacquer, all of which had their own aesthetic and were functional for the hot liquids of Chinese society. So what did you need glass for? What did it do? There wasn't any gap to fill. You have a glass vessel like this, which is replicating, it's become cloudy over time because it's been buried, but it's glass and it's replicating. Oh, I think we might have lost our Zoom. Oh, I'm getting a Zoom connection problem. Anyway, it's replicating glass. So I'm getting a connection area. I don't know whether those on Zoom can still hear me. Okay. It's been longer than an hour. It's just Zoom. Okay, sorry about that. I hope you're back with me, people on Zoom. Our connection just timed out. So I don't know what you missed, but I was talking about this piece, which is a piece of glass from the Han period in China, which is very clearly representing a jade ear cup. But as said, this had no place really among Chinese artistic society at that world at that time, because although it replicates jade, you've got jade, and porcelain by that high-fired stoneware was getting much more transparent. You would get porcelain in a few centuries' time, so you didn't need the aesthetics of glass, either the translucency, and you wanted to drink hot liquids out of these ear cups, and your glass with lead in it would just break. So it was a pretty useless thing. So even though this glass was adopted in much of the world, it wasn't quite adopted in the same way in, am I moving? No. Oh. Sorry, Pauline, I don't know what's happening. We're not moving. Okay. Yeah, there we go. And in that, it was completely unlike silk. If you think of cultivated silk, which came from central China and moved, or North China plains, and moved across the whole of Eurasia and some of Africa during this period, same period during the first millennium AD, silk was a material unlike any other fiber found in the rest of the world. It had qualities, its fineness, its strength, that no other fibers had. Aesthetically, it looked different, its sheen and everything. So it filled a gap people didn't know they had, but it was something different. Glass wasn't in China. So I think it's a very interesting contrast. I'm going to whiz through now the rest of the slides because I've got very little time left because of the technical issues. But the story of glass doesn't go away. We get new glass coming into China by land and sea routes, new forms of glass such as these Roman pieces, a Sasanian piece, blown glass, and they all seem to have set off a new little movement towards making pieces that were similar of glass, but not really lasted. So you get this stuttering story of glass in China. It's not a continuum, and it's not something that you get great achievements or interesting aesthetic or technological achievements in. This changed slightly, of course, with Buddhism, where glass did find a new role, because crystal is one of the 7 treasures of Buddhism, as you know, and glass was often used to replace it. And so in Buddhism, glass found a new home, if you like. It found a new function, and we get rosemary beads made of glass. We get reliquaries made of glass, shown here at Farman's glass, crystal and jade, of course, but often glass. And glass continues to come in, and this is a piece found at Farman's the temple, which the reliquaries came from in just outside Xi'an in China, and this is a piece of Islamic glass, probably made at Nishapur, given as an offering in this Buddhist temple. So as I said, it finds this new home, a new function and aesthetic in China. And I'm going to say, we know this piece is made from Islamic glass because of it's been tested in Nishapur, and this little reliquary, which is here in Toshodaiji, is also a piece of a little relic flask. It's also Islamic glass. So we start seeing glass getting a new function. Well, glass beads, of course, also form part of the sharira, the remains of the Buddha that we see in many of these relics. I put this slide up because this is a sale of such beads, which are semi-precious stones, glass, which has recently come up for sale, rather controversially, because it was looted from a stupa in India by a British man, many in the last century, and kept in his family and coming up for sale, as said now in Sotheby's, I think in Hong Kong, yeah. And also, I mean, these are seen to be the remains of the Buddha in many ways. So they're seen to be bodily remains, of which there's international laws about not selling, but also the whole thing is about the history of whether this belonged to this family anyway. But glass becomes very much part of these assemblages as well. And said, from seeing glass, which is made in West Asia and North Africa, which continues to be part of the story, but very much in terms of beads, the Asian, South Asian, especially those made in very southeast of India and Sri Lanka, those sort of beads in the end of the first millennium and into the second millennium become very, very dominant as trading and exchange gifts across the world. And so this is a map done by Caitlin Green showing where such beads have been found. And you can see there's several sites in Japan where they're found. And the one orange dot in the middle of China is Luoyang, where a temple, stupa, here in Luoyang, where a great vast number of beads were found from this site. And so I want to end with this quote, which came up in a paper that I was reading for this, which really exemplifies what I wanted to say. This scholar concludes that the glass process has always been on the edge of mainstream aesthetics in China. And I think exploring why is very much at the core of what Materia-Mind is doing, this interaction between humans and objects. It's not always a straightforward story we tell. It's not having the materials, having the desire. You have to have a combination of factors in order to take a new material and become adept, for it to become a core of your society. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the engaging presentation on long-term global historical perspective, including scientific analysis, Professor Whitfield. And then questions and answers for each presentation will be addressed during general discussion. So we will move forward to the next presentation. Next presentation is the title, Technological Transition and Innovation in Ancient East Asia Materials, as seen from neutron and X-ray based analysis by Joseph Ryan from Okayama University. Professor Joseph Ryan, excuse me.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Ryan. I'm an archaeologist here in Okayama University. And I would like to first thank the organizers for this wonderful opportunity. The title of my talk today is Technological Tradition and Innovation in Ancient East Asian Metals, as seen from neutron and X-ray based analyses. Today, I will be presenting on a series of analyses that are still a work in progress. So we are just now beginning on our journey. So I must warn you that I don't have any firm conclusions to present as of yet, but the analyses and current results nevertheless present interesting avenues for future research, and I'm excited to share them with you today. So from the mid-3rd to the early 7th century, the Kofun period of Japan was characterized by the construction of earthen mounded tombs across the archipelago. Inside these tombs were buried a significant number of bronze mirrors, iron tools, and iron weapons. And while these burial goods are believed to have acted as prestige goods, there is still much that is unknown about the nature of their production and circulation. On the left, you can see several very large keyhole-shaped mounded tombs of the Mozu Furuichi mounded tomb group located in Osaka. which was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List several years ago. On the right are two pictures of the truly astounding amount of iron weapons that can be found from a single tomb. Here are some examples of the iron arrowheads of this period, which, as you can see, display a wide variety of shapes and sizes. Production technology also varied from simple chisel-cut examples seen on the left to which are often found from settlement sites, and examples requiring complicated forging, as seen on the right, which are almost solely found from mounded tombs. So we have a link between technology and social significance that needs to be addressed. Here are some examples of iron swords of this period in single-edge and double-edged varieties. As you can see in the image on the left, the swords of this period presented a variety of cross-sections, from lenticular examples to diamond-shaped examples, and they also come in a variety of thicknesses, from very thin to very thick, obviously requiring different technological skills. So, in order to deepen our understanding of the production and circulation of the metal weapons of this period, we need to carefully consider the morphology and production technology. Unfortunately, this is not easily done, as most of the objects are heavily corroded, making analysis through naked eye observation quite difficult. Additionally, destructive analysis is often not actively pursued in Japanese archaeology, but also archaeology from around the world, from the perspective of cultural heritage conservation. Neutron imaging, and of course, X-ray CT, allow a non-invasive approach in our quest to understand the morphology and production technology of these metal objects. Today, I will mainly be talking about neutron analysis conducted on 4 bronze arrowheads of the Yayoi period and 4 iron sword fragments of the following Kofun period. On the left here is a neutron tomography image of an iron weapon, which I'll discuss later. On the right is an X-ray CT image of the very same iron weapon, and as you can see, the results are quite similar. However, you may notice that some areas are easier to see in one of the methods over the other, and this has to do with the way that neutrons and X-rays interact with the object in question. Therefore, neutron tomography and X-ray CT are best used as complementary methods of analysis in order to further deepen our understanding, rather than being the case of one method being superior to the other. Okay. So let's first consider the 4 bronze arrowheads belonging to the Yayoi period, in our case, from roughly the first 3 centuries AD. To begin, most of the bronze arrowheads of the Yayoi period were cast in a consecutive casting method, in a mold like that seen on the left of the screen. On the right, I have shown unfinished examples in their unseparated form. Upon entering the Kofun period, we see significant morphological changes between the simple arrowheads of the Yayoi period, shown on the left, and the complex morphologies presented by the arrowheads of the Kofun period, shown on the right. Upon entering the Kofun period, the socio-political significance of these arrowheads also increases greatly. However, it is yet uncertain what technological changes were behind this transition. What technological changes supported this socio-political transformation? Were the Kofun period arrowheads also cast in a consecutive fashion, or were they cast individually? As the molds of this period have not been unearthed through archaeological excavation, we do not know. So in order to approach this issue, we conducted neutron imaging at J-Park in Japan, utilizing the Raden beam line. We analyzed both Yayoi and Kofun bronze arrowheads in order to make a comparison of the production technology through time, Today, I will be presenting several of the results concerning the Yayoi arrowheads. The bronze arrowheads were first wrapped in aluminum foil and placed inside aluminum cylinders for imaging. The cylinders were then rotated 360 degrees, while neutron beams were directed at the rotating stage and the detector. Aluminum is used because it does not interact strongly with neutrons, so it provides support without creating too much noise. Here is an example of a 3D rendering of one of the arrowheads with gray tone on the left and false color on the right. Various levels of attenuation are represented in different colors, showing different degrees of mineralization or corrosion in relation to the relatively well-preserved metal. You can see highly corroded areas, well-preserved metal, porosity, etc., visually presented in the image on the right. It might be a little bit difficult to piece what is what, but if we segment it, things become a little easier to digest. So on the right half of the screen are different attenuating levels digitally extracted and presented individually. So from the left to the right, we have areas of high porosity or air bubbles. Then next in blue, we have the relatively healthy metal. Next in green, red, and purple, we have successive levels of mineralization or corrosion. The location of air bubbles or porosity may reveal the direction of pore during the casting process. This is an area for future analysis, which holds special significance in our question of the mold. While neutron tomography can reveal various facets of the production technology, it can also reveal a good deal about the state of preservation, which can then be used for building effective conservation management strategies. A lot of the corrosion and internal weaknesses are not apparent visually. So this can be very helpful for conservation management. So the bronze arrowheads were then mounted to an aluminum frame for time-of-flight neutron diffraction, conducted on the Takumi beamline at J-Park. The choice of measurement area was driven by the previous neutron tomography analysis, which made it possible to target areas where metal appeared to remain in relatively good condition. Targeting such areas allows consideration of the original metal rather than areas that display overwhelming mineralization. Unfortunately, I do not have time to cover the results of the diffraction analysis today. I hope I can do that next time. But phase analysis revealed, as you can see here, copper and cuprite, which is to be expected with a bronze arrowhead like the one we analyzed. So I'll save that for another day. To complement the neutron tomography and diffraction, we also conducted X-ray CT, micro CT. From the XCT measurements, it was possible to observe superficial patina present on all the arrowheads, especially on M1, shown in the bottom right, where it is thicker. On M2 in the bottom left, there's a layer of less absorbing material, as you can see here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, which is probably soil that's and concretion. So it's possible to also verify the presence, as I mentioned before, of air bubbles or porosity, especially on M1 on the bottom right here, which has a high level of porosity compared, for example, to the object above. So comparative analysis of porosity also is holds various possibility for future analysis. Okay, so here's a side-by-side comparison of neutron tomography results and X-ray micro CT results, highlighting the complementary nature of the two methods, best used in tandem. So XRF analysis allowed us to verify that the grains of more absorbing material visible in the XCT images contained grains of lead. In future analysis, we hope to consider the relationship between the casting process and the accumulation of lead grains in certain parts of the arrowhead, which can hopefully tell us, again, direction of pore and also the structure of the mold itself. Lastly, here is a section of a bronze, here is a picture of a bronze arrowhead where part of the patina, the surface patina, is no longer present. The XRF spectra taken for this area and also for an area where the patina is present show that on the patina there is less copper with respect to the bulk, showing the decuprification process on the surface. So moving along to the iron swords of the Kofun period, which is about the mid-3rd century CE to 6th century CE. Traditional swords of later periods were characterized by low carbon steel in the center, which was soft and flexible, and high carbon steel on the outside, which was sharp and hard, but brittle. This combination allowed for a functionally superior sword. However, it's not completely certain when this technology first appears and where it comes from. The development process, there's still a lot we don't know about that, about this technology that would later characterize the samurai sword that everyone loves. So in order to address this issue, we took 4 iron sword fragments from the Kofun period and conducted neutron and X-ray based analysis in order to approach this issue. So neutron tomography results are shown here on one of the samples with gray tone on the left and false color on the right. This is a cross-section of a single-edged iron sword, and neutron tomography allows the visualization of metal and different mineralization phases based on their attenuation coefficients. Blue in the middle is the healthy metal or healthier metal remains, so the remains of the blade itself. Yellow is mid-attenuation mineralization phases, so corrosion, and red is even heavier corrosion. Notice the prominent ridge line I've shown with the blue arrows on the top and bottom, where it juts out. The prominent ridge line, or shinogi, can be seen through the in the image. I've emphasized it with a white dotted line. This is not visible. It's not apparent visually at all, but it's important for establishing typochronological change. So making use of corroded fragments to the best of our ability. So tomography slices in gray tone and false color, different attenuation coefficients throughout the sample, and the presence of a relevant number of cracks and voids within the core are evident. So red, lots of light elements, heavy corrosion. Darker green and blue is healthier metal. Cross sections from another sword fragment. The yellow areas on the right highlight the readable shape of the blade. Again, visually, it's not apparent the type of cross section, so this is very helpful in pulling out that hidden information that otherwise would be lost to us. One more fragment. Here's another fragment. The blue area on the right highlights the readable shape of the blade. In this example, there is no ridgeline or shinogi present, presenting a different cross-section morphology than the example I showed previously. And again, this morphological assessment is not possible visually, as all the samples are highly corroded. We now come to the most interesting of the 4 samples. This fragment has traditionally been considered to be a double-edged sword. And I think you'd agree with that assessment from the picture on the left. You have the sharp tip, comes down symmetrically. It looks like a double-edged sword. And neutron tomography initially showed a lenticular cross-section, confirming the traditional assessment. You can see here, the cross-section also looks to be a normal double-edged sword. However, here is where things got tricky. Aligning the sample along different axes revealed that different areas of the fragment showed completely different cross-sections. So in A and B here, you see single-edged triangular profiles, while here in a different area, you can see the lenticular double-edged profile. Moreover, the presence of a triangular recess here at D, this is a blank. A triangular recess also becomes apparent. It's also, I'll discuss this a bit later, but this recess here seems to be bordered by a highly attenuating layer. So there's something there besides iron. So careful consideration of the neutron tomography data led us to reinterpret the artifact not as a double-edged sword, but actually as a large iron arrowhead with barbs. The combination of single and double-edged profiles agrees with this assessment, and the triangular recess I mentioned fits nicely here in the space between the tang and the barb. So I'd like to now consider the highly attenuating area surrounding the arrowhead. So around the arrowhead in certain areas, we see very white areas. This means that it's interacting both with X-rays, so it has a higher Z or a higher atomic number, and in neutrons, it's more high attenuating. It has a higher attenuation sensitivity. So there's something there that's not iron. So first we approach the attenuating areas through X-ray micro-CT. To begin, please look at the top image. The green arrow, a little bit difficult to see, points to a red horizontal line that transects the objects. This can be seen quite nicely as a bright white line in the middle image, which is the X-ray micro-CT. And if we only segment this absorbing layer, we remove everything but this highly absorbing layer, we can see the layer goes inward all the way across the object. So we know it's something that's not iron and something that's covering the object. Thankfully, there was an area that protruded to the surface, so we were able to conduct XRF and confirm that the highly attenuating areas contain both mercury and sulfur. This agrees with the optical microscopy results, which showed the area in red. So cinnabar is the most likely culprit. So this slice shows sharp fragmentation of the high Z area. So if you look around the object, we have corrosion and dirt. Inside the object, these green arrows point to white, bright white lines. This is the cinnabar or mercury and sulfur area that covers the iron. And what I want to focus on now is this orange, where the orange arrow points. It points to an area where the white lines protrude violently outward. It's very sharp fragmentation. So the development of mineralization phases with their increase in volume have exerted pressure outward, creating a cavity here, creating cavities and detachment and exfoliation of the surface. And even more interesting, the fact that the strongly attenuating this white area, it presents clean breaks without plastic deformation. And this is very important. It's not bent at all, very sharp breakage, which suggests, in our opinion, the presence of lacquer. We've seen this in other examples as well. Other organic binders will probably have plastic deformation, while lacquer presents very sharp breakage. So we believe that the iron arrowhead had been applied with a layer of lacquer containing cinnabar. Not only were we able to reinterpret the double-edged sword fragment as a large iron arrowhead, we were also able to achieve new information concerning its ritual and/or decorative utilization within the burial. We next conducted time-of-flight neutron diffraction on the 4 iron fragments in order to identify the presence of residual metal and characterize its composition and microstructure. We hoped to contribute to the discussion I mentioned earlier about sword production technology. Unfortunately, as you can see in this green box here, that shows ferrite amount, well, put simply, no information about carbon content was unfortunately achieved this time around. But nevertheless, there are things that we can deduce from this information. For example, it's important to underline that the parts exhibiting the best conservation conditions are characterized by a dominant presence of goethite, which is further along the line of corrosion from ferrite. So areas that have goethite are areas that are, well, put differently, this method can be exploited on heavily corroded iron-based samples in order to locate areas that once contained metal. We know from the corrosion profile that the areas once contained metal, and this is helpful in reconstructing the morphology, which can no longer be done visually. So the approach used here, exploiting fruitful complementarity of neutron, X-ray, and other techniques, has the potential to reveal the nature of the significant technological changes that occurred during the transition from the Yayoi to the Kofun period, and then beyond. Additionally, it also has the potential to reveal interregional networks of interaction, specifically what is the relationship with different regions within Japan, to those regions to the Korean Peninsula, and also to China. And of course, fruitful collaborative international research with other regions as well. So the potential to reveal interregional networks of interaction as seen through technological change on an unprecedented and detailed level, thereby contributing, hopefully, to the Materia-Mind framework. So this ends my discussion today of our current work in progress. I hope next time I'll be able to present a few more concrete results, and I hope everyone will look forward to those. So, funding information, I'd also like to thank the team that I work with for all of their help as well. Of course, this can't be done by myself. So I'd like to thank funding and also team members as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for the engaging presentation, which provided diverse perspectives grounded in scientific analysis. Next presentation is Technological Transition and Innovation with Paleolithic Beads by Ms. Pauline Coste from Pantheon-Sorbonne, Paris University.
Yes, I will introduce a bit myself first. I'm a PhD student from Paris, Sorbonne University. I'm working about reconstruction with Paleolithic people, and the looking and also what they might have wear in different period and cultures, almost for Europe. I'm also a filmmaker, so I'm really interested in that reconstruction for documentaries and movies. First, I will talk to you a little bit about what happened in the middle of Paleolithic with Neanderthal in Europe and Homo sapiens in Africa. It's the beginning of adornment at that moment. They are contemporary, but in different areas. And later we will talk about Upper Paleolithic in Europe. So we have with Homo sapiens in Africa, and at the same time, Homo neanderthalensis in Europe, as you can see. And this is the beginning of some element about adornment. For Homo sapiens, we have the oldest evidence, the earliest evidence about using shells, pierced shells, one in Bismun Cave in Morocco for 140,000 years ago. Also some shells in Israel 100,000 years ago. And Blombos Cave, it's in really South Africa 70,000 years ago. But they are all linked to Homo sapiens. And sometimes they have red ochre on it. For Neanderthals, we don't have pierced shells, but it seems, or maybe this one, but it is a big one, and we are not sure it is adornment. Recent research proved they use talons of birds, maybe as ornament. This is a Krapina level in Croatia from around 130,000 years ago. And also the use of feathers. We have evidence in Italy, in Fumane Cave. And also for Neanderthals, around 45,000 years ago, we have evidence of use of red ochre and manganese, maybe for adornment or maybe for something else. But you see scratches on it, so it was used. At the end of Neanderthal period in Europe, we start to find a lot of jewelry, adornment, mostly in teeth, mammal teeth, and sometimes also the same talons, like talons of birds. But this is controversial because it is the moment when Homo sapiens arrive, and we don't know if they were really Neanderthals that did it, or is it a moment where they met Homo sapiens and their culture changed a little bit. For Upper Paleolithic, Aurignacian, so we are around 40,000 years ago in Europe. For Upper Paleolithic, we have several names for different time for Upper Paleolithic. So the first one in Europe is called Aurignacian. As you can see, it's a cold period all that time. We are in an ice age in Europe. So we are still, this time, only Homo sapiens, no Neanderthal left. And first, we are going to talk about around 40,000 years ago. The first beads for Aurignacian. With the arrival of Homo sapiens, there are many, many beads in all the settlements. For Neanderthal, that's not true. We have really few examples. The only one I show you are the only one we know. But for Homo sapiens, it is in every excavation, in every layers. We have a lot of shells, fossil or fresh, from Mediterranean or Atlantic. We are even in 200 or 300 kilometers, so example of trade, quite for sure. We have also ivory beads, mammoth ivory beads. The most known is the basket beads. It's really small, like less a millimeter. And we have a workshop of ivory basket beads, even in Dordogne, in 35,000 years ago, in Castelmerle rock shelter, where they found each step of the fabrication of the beads, what in French we call chaîne opératoire. We have also this beautiful fish shape in ivory. You see my arrow here. We start to have also other materials like steatite found in the Pyrenees and the belemite. It's not very used, and after we won't see it again. And sometimes stone are sometimes used, like small pebbles pierced, but it's not the most often. And of course, the start of deer canine start at that time, but we will have a lot later. For the next period called gravation, around 30,000 years ago. It's still very cold at that time. What is really interesting is we have a lot of burials and a lot of burials with adornment. So we can know what kind of beads and where they were on the body of people. So this is reconstruction of upper Paleolithic gravation burial, almost in North Italy. This is a Lady of Cavillon skull. You can see their deer spit or deer canine on the front, and a lot of small shells on the skull. Maybe it was a hat before or something that sticks to the skull before after death. And here is a necklace. We found the original arrangement of the necklace because it was stick in the clay. So we can know fish vertebra and Littoria, so small shells, and deer spit. This is a map of all the burial we know for gravation period. As you can see, there is a lot in southwest France, a lot also in Italy, and in Central Europe, there is another big area, but the famous known are from Sungir, which are really, really beautifully decorated in Russia. For the kind of beads of gravation period, we have also ivory beads, as you can see, with different shapes. Maybe this one were buttons, because they were found in the torso. We have also really small rectangular beads, as in Sungir or Pato in France and Sungir in Russia. We have also this kind of A-drop shape ivory beads, washed element, maybe some adornment too, and bracelets in ivory mammoth, and some Rhodes ivory too. And for the shells, this is not archaeological element, but like it is in fresh. So Cypraea, small rounded shapes of shells are really appreciated at that time. Dentalium too, so this is all shell. And for the teeth, it's almost canine deer or fox or wolf canine. And there is also in Central Europe a stone disc, a quite big stone disc. For southwest France, the problem is that most of the burials are, the lack of information is big because the remains are poorly, the information is lacking almost. But we found in Cro-Magnon rock shelter a lot of elements, like these small rounded beads, but we don't know where it was on the body because it's old excavation. And maybe of funerary practice, mortuary practice that were different in that area. This is ivory bead from Cro-Magnon and the teeth beads from Cro-Magnon too. And this is from Pato, it's really close. It's quite the same. It's like 300 meters from Cro-Magnon. This is early gravation. This is also early gravation, and this is late gravation. There is several million, thousand of years between the two. In Italy, the information is very good because we have a lot of very well preserved burials with a lot of information for the jewelry and the adornments. This is a group from Balsi Rossi. As you can see, there is many people. I didn't say it, but this is with the this is Lady of Cavillon, for example, and this is the burial. So I did for my master degree research to see where were the beads on the body and what kind of beads are they. So in red, it is the shells. In blue, it is deer spit or deer canine. And in green, you have ivory, or here it's or bones or shell vertebra, fish vertebra. So you see, it's really obvious that the head was mostly decorated at that time. And there is really a group for Italy. Fashion of the time. For Lady of Cavillon, as I show you the skull before, so it's that kind of shell, Cyclopneretea shell. As you can see, there is many of them, and around 200 on the head, and some near the left knee, and 22 their spit. Other elements from Italy, the ivory beads. You can see this one, very beautiful, maybe imitating red deer spit, but with engravings on it. Similar from Barmagande, so in Balsirossi caves, to Ain Candide, which is 100 kilometers from there. We can also ask the question of the color at that time, because in my study of Paussodato e II in Italy, I can see that the Cyclopneretea, which is originally that color, were really different. We have some red, some the natural color like yellow, and also some white, and also some black one. The black are maybe burnt. We can prove, I don't have the study to prove it, that everything is done on purpose, but maybe originally, as in cave, there were colors in the adornment. We can see also some element of yellow on the deer teeth of the same burial of a man, Paussodato II, I mean. And this is Cypraea neretea beads. The original color is that, so you can see red or white in the original when you collect it near the sea. It is really rare to find some at that time in a Mediterranean area, because they are deeper than the Cyclopneretea, which is found really near the sea. So maybe it was some particular grave goods. Maybe it was important for that time, like wealthness, richness for these burials. And also in Italy, there is no ivory mammoth. So when we found some, it is really important. It is rare for people of that time at that, in that area. In Central Europe, the fashion is a bit different. We have a red deer canine and ivory mammoth, but there is a lot of ivory mammoth available. But as you can see, even if we have many people that were found in burials, few of them have adornment. But you can see also it's always the head that is decorated. This is two individuals of a triple burial in Czech Republic in Dolní Věstonice. As you can see, the red ochre is really big on the head. And this is element of fox canine or wolf canine, and also some ivory beads. But small, a few elements. This is a reconstruction of the burial. This is a burial of two babies, two twins in Kremswartberg in Austria. they found some element even for babies. So maybe it's grave goods, maybe they were on the babies, 2 baby boys. And this is the shape of the kind of ivory beads found there. And some small and rounded shells. This is an element of a grave in Central Europe called Brno in Czech Republic. They found also dentalium, so a lot of shells, but it was not preserved, but around 600 of them, fossil shells. And what is interesting is that in cultural layers, they found much more adornment, but not in the grave. So maybe it was different. During burials, they don't put maybe the adornment of the people. You can see little pebbles pierced also, and some rings, rings for ivory rings. The east of Russia had the most known graves in Sungir with many, many ivory beads, like thousands. And the smallest child had the most beads. Okay, have it? For other country, we have really few elements. Pavilion in England is very known as the Red Lady of Pavilion, but it was a young man with a lot of rods of ivory and maybe some rings, but in the torso, and some little rounded shells with ochre. And the one in Portugal is really similar to the one of Italy and his adornment. More detail about Russia. You can see the many beads in the men, adult men, and this is the 2 children's, one teenager and one child, with many grave goods. This is a stick with ivory, so it may be very hard to do. They are one of the oldest Paleolithic burials, 34,000 years ago. And the little boy had almost 5,000 small ivory rectangular beads. And it is the one that had the most. And this one, 4,000, and it was 3,000 for the adult. This is the kind of the shape of this small ivory rectangular beads. And the bracelets in ivory are also known from the adults, and sometimes dye in white, in black. So as I say, maybe some colors at that time. This is Malta child, it's East Russia. The necklace, some elements are in ivory. You can see a copy of a mold of the grave, the skull of the children, and the necklace. Some beautiful elements in ivory are small beads in ivory too, and a fragment of bracelets in ivory. So for gravation, it's the period I know the best. We can really manage that to figure that there were some groups linked and connected with the same fashion. From Italy, it's obvious, and maybe the one in Portugal is linked because the same way of wearing and the same kind of beads is there. Another group in Central Europe may be really connected with the one in Russia. And this one, as I said, is the oldest, so maybe it's going that way. And the DNA is showing also that the same kind of links. But as I said, there is connection we see connection in the way of knapping flint at that time. That's why we call it gravation. But maybe the way they wear beads, it's also a sign of link of these cultures. And in the Venices, when some elements are shown, so the most of the time is the head that is or adorned, or maybe it's the hairdress. We don't really know. This is one from Willendorf and in Central Europe, and this is the one from Kostenki near here. I just put these two examples, but there is many. You can see elements also in the torso, just beyond the breast. For Magdalenian, so the next period, there is also other periods there, but I want to simplify my purpose. So Magdalenian, you can see is here on the map, and in the east there is another culture called epigraviation. So, but I will talk just only about Magdalenian. It's around 25,000 years ago to 12,000 years ago. There is also really beautiful and interesting element for adornment. Lion and bear canine, sometimes engraved with animals in South France. Washer pierced from a bone, and sometimes it's maybe like a pre-cinema, a thaumatrope. If you put strength in it and you turn it, this is the same. And as you can see, the legs of the animal is going down and up. But there is also a lot of other pierced washers. What is interesting in Magdalenian is the connection between France and Spain, because they really have the same elements, and this is very specific. We have engraved head of horses or ibex made on a bone in a horse stong called bone hyoid in French. And as you can see, it's always the same. And two pierced part, and this is a place, La Bastide, where they found a lot of them in the same area. Southwest France is, and Dordogne, it's the northeast part where we found them. But we found a lot in Pyrenees and a lot in Cantabria in North Spain. There is also this ivories called stomach beads with engravings in center of France, and horses incised engraved with a triangle. This is a very known burial of Magdalenian period called of the Lady of Saint-Germain-la-Rivière, found in West France, in Gironde, around 19,000 years ago. And as you can see, the deer canine were engraved by sign. This is the burial. And what is interesting is that at that time, there were no deer in that area. The deer were in Spain, so thousands of kilometers, hundreds of kilometers from there. So, and also the studies show that there is no pairs. For an animal, there is two deer canine, but here there are several animals, different animals. So maybe it's also a sign of richness, because it's very rare at that time. Or maybe she was coming from Cantabria or South Pyrenees. In Magdalenian, in Paris region, there is mostly fossil shells that were appreciated for Magdalenian. For shells also in Dordogne, in southwest France, we have Cypraea also, the shells that I mentioned before that were rare or difficult to find. And the body is ornate on the several parts, and the shells are going by pairs, two on the knees and two on the ankles, and two near the arms, and two on each side of the front. At Dordogne, still Dordogne in southwest France, in 12,000 years ago, we have a very known burial of a child called La Madeleine child with 1,200 shells found in the body. So it was maybe sewn on the clothes. So it's mostly dentalium, and they are fresh from Atlantic. So it's 200 kilometers from the burials. So as you can see, a lot of trade, even in Paleolithic period. To finish, in Mesolithic, so at the moment the climate change, and just before Neolithic people arrive with agriculture and so on, we have some beautiful burials with a lot of elements. The one is in Germany. The shaman of Bad Dürrenberg is considered a shaman because of the particularity of the grave goods, and the beads are amazing too. And this is a reconstruction of the shaman of Bad Dürrenberg. And to finish also, this is several reconstruction about Mesolithic period based on burials. This is from Russia, and this is from France. And I thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for the engaging presentation on long-term human history, supported by various concrete data. After this, we will take a break for approximately 35 minutes. Please feel free to exchange ideas on presentation during these times, if you cannot wait for the general discussion. Yeah, anyway, at 3:30 p.m., we will restart the presentations. Okay, may I restart the presentation? The next presentation is the transmission of objects and technology as seen from chemical analysis of ancient glass beads from Tomomi Tamura, NARA National Research Institute for Cultural Property, Japan. Okay, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting such a very fascinating workshop today. I'm from NARA. I will be talking about ancient glass beads in Japan, entitled here. So in Japan, the discovery of glass production workshop at Asuka-ike archaeological site in Nara in early 1990s revealed that domestic glass production had begun in the second half of 7th century AD. But even before the 7th century, large quantities of glass artifacts, glass products, were distributed in Japan. They are mostly glass beads, and at least 600,000 beads have been discovered in excavations. And most of them are imported from outside of Japanese archipelago. It makes us curious about where these glass beads are made and by what route they were brought to Japan. The questions are extremely important for considering the trade relationships of the time. Glass products have been actively traded over land and sea routes since ancient times. The trade route for glass was called the glass road and reached from the Mediterranean world in the west to the Japanese archipelago in the east. When investigating the origins of glass beads, scientific research, including chemical analysis and isotope analysis, can be very effective. The field studying artifacts from both archaeology and scientific analysis is called archaeometry. we applied several analytical methods for investigation of glass beads. The chemical compositions are measured mainly by EDX, because the EDX is non-destructive methods. But isotope analysis was performed using TI mass and multi-collector ICP mass. This is a little bit destructive. Then, now I talk about the provenance and distribution route of ancient glass beads as seen from compositional and isotope analysis. Glass beads distributed in Japan are divided into large three groups based on their compositional chemical compositions. First is lead glass and potash glass and soda glass groups. The lead glass group includes lead barium glass and lead glass. The potash glass is divided into two groups based on the amount of alumina and calcium content. The soda glass is a little more complicated, but it is classified into 5 types based on the amount of alumina, calcium, magnesium, and potassium oxide. We believe that each group corresponds to a specific production area or workshop. I have color-coded each group according to the estimated origin. The gray groups are from East Asia. The green groups are from India or Southeast Asia. The blue one is West Asia or Central Asia, and the red one is from the Mediterranean world. I have shown the glass beads belonging to each group on the world map. There is a strong relationship between a compositional group and bead-making techniques. For example, most glass beads from South and Southeast Asia are small monochrome beads made by drawing method called Indo-Pacific beads. On the other hand, Western type of glass has a strong relation to the segmenting or folding method instead of drawing method. Let's take a closer look at each region. First, glass beads from East Asia. East Asian glass is characterized by high lead content. In particular, lead barium glass is originated in China. It was first introduced to Japan. The majority are tubular beads, cylindrical beads. Tubular beads are divided into 3 types: L1A, L1B, L1C. Among them, L1A is the earliest type of lead barium glass tubular beads in Japan. They were distributed in northern Kyushu between the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC. Same kind of beads have also been excavated in Jilin in China and in the southwestern part of Korea. This trade route was also used to introduce the advanced metal tool culture to Japan. On the other hand, group L1B and L1C have never been found on the Korean peninsula. So it is suggested that these glass beads may have been imported directly from the lower reaches of Yangtze River in China. There are also a few comma-shaped beads and small beads made of lead barium glass. Of these, comma-shaped beads and some kind of small beads were processed in Japan. Comma-shaped beads have been found mainly in northern Kyushu along with their molds. Based on the characteristics of the products and molds, they were believed to have been made using hot melt casting method. This is an application of the technological tradition of bronze casting to glass beads production. In fact, the Sugu Gotanda site, this one, where the glass molds were discovered, was located right next to the bronze casting workshop. In northern Kinki, on the other hand, small beads were made by drilling holes in small pieces of glass by cold work. Main artifacts related to the processing of glass beads have been found at the Naguoka site in northern Kyoto. Quartz beads are also produced at this site, and it is clear that imported pieces of red barium glass were processed into small beads using cold work in the same way as stone beads. By the way, at the Naguoka site, the reprocessing of Indo-Pacific beads from Indo or Southeast Asia was also conducted. Only unfinished products have been excavated at the Naguoka site, but finished products have been found in neighboring areas. Just like stone beads, Indo-Pacific beads were split, drilled, and polished in the solid state to be processed into smaller beads. Next, let's look at the glass beads from Indo or Southeast Asia. Indo or Southeast Asian glass beads were introduced to Japan in the 1st century BC and distributed until the latter half of the 6th century. Most of them are typical Indo-Pacific beads. Indo-Pacific beads are small monochrome beads made by the drawing technique. The distribution of Indo-Pacific beads extended as far as Korea and Japan. The production of Indo-Pacific beads are believed to have begun at latest in the 3rd century BC with the establishment of the Arikamedu site on the east coast of South India. And the production techniques then spread to Southeast Asia, but never reached East Asia. On the other hand, the products, the glass beads, were distributed in large quantities in Japan from the 1st century AD onwards, like these. Indo-Pacific beads in Japan are made of potash glass and soda glass. The earliest Indo-Pacific beads imported into Japan were potash glass. Potash glass beads were distributed in the large quantities in the 1st century AD. Potash glass is subdivided into 2 groups, group P1 and P2 by the concentration of alumina and calcium oxide. They can be also divided by rubidium and strontium content. And interestingly, each group has strong relations with their color tone. Group P1 corresponds to the cobalt blue glass beads, and group P2 corresponds to the copper blue beads. Based on the compositional comparison with the previous studies and on the distribution areas, we suppose group P1 was possibly produced in India. On the other hand, group P2 was probably made in the central Vietnam to the coastal area of South China. Indo-Pacific beads made of soda glass was introduced into Japan later than potash glass. Group S2, S4, S5 are South and Southeast Asian origin soda glass. Of these, group S2 was the most widely circulated in Japan. Group S2 are distributed from the 4th to 6th century AD. Group S2 contains high alumina and low calcium content corresponding to the most common glass beads found in South and Southeast Asia. As a feature of this type of glass, they show various colors. As a similar example, I will introduce glass beads from Angkor Borei in Cambodia. Angkor Borei is an archaeological site located in the Takeo province in Phnom Penh, south of Phnom Penh, and it is one of the capital city of Funan in the pre-Angkor period. We conducted chemical analysis of 167 glass beads collected from this site. Their chemical compositions are very similar to group S2 distributed in Japan at the same period. Among the group S2 glass beads, orange bees appeared in the latest in Japan in the latter half of the 6th century, and they were found in large quantities at the Fujinoki coffin in Nara. Considering the trade route, there is a notable example in Korean Peninsula. Many orange grass beads have been found in the tomb of King Murion of Baekje. There is an interesting passage in the Nihon Shoki, the Chronicles of Japan. It says that in 556 AD, the king of Baekje, and he is the son of the King Murion, sent an envoy to Japan to present 2 slaves and Funan treasures. As I mentioned before, Funan is the name of the ancient Cambodian kingdom, and Indo-Pacific beads containing orange beads have been found in large quantities at archaeological sites of Funan in Cambodia or Vietnam. So it is possible that glass beads were included in the Funan treasures mentioned in the Chronicles of Japan. This indicates that the trade route for the Indo-Pacific beads in the 6th century is thought to have gone from Southeast Asia to southern dynasties of China to Baekje in Korea and Nara in Japan. Next, I will discuss Mediterranean type of glass beads in Japan. Mediterranean glass is natural glass, and natural glass was distributed in Japan in the 2nd century AD. In the 2nd century, 3 types of natural glass beads flowed into different regions in Japan. One of cobalt blue double-layered segmented beads. The second is light blue opaque tubular beads. And the last one is cobalt blue round beads. The first cobalt blue segmented beads contain a lot of manganese, suggesting that they may have been made in the Syro-Palestinian region. The second tubular beads were opacified with calcium antimonate, but the origin is unknown so far. And the last cobalt blue round beads contain high antimony and low manganese, suggesting that they may have come from Egypt. In our recent overseas surveys, double-layer segmented beads very similar to the glass beads from Hirabaru No. 1 tomb in Japan were discovered in Mongolia and Kazakhstan. Their chemical composition is very similar. So double-layered glass beads from Hirabaru No. 1 tomb were probably made in east coast of Mediterranean Sea and distributed via the steppe route. On the other hand, natural glass with low manganese and high antimony type, like this, like dark blue round beads in Japan, has never been found in the inland areas of the Eurasian continent so far. It indicates that the cobalt blue natural glass beads distributed in Japan in the 2nd century AD had 2 lineages from different provenance and trade routes. That is, the double-layered segmented beads may have been brought in via steppe road. On the other hand, the round beads possibly distributed via sea route. Next, we are going to discuss Western or Central Asian type of plant ash glass in Japan. Plant ash glass is a low alumina, high calcium glass that contains more than 1.5% of magnesium and potassium. It was around the middle of the 5th century that plant ash glass beads began to be distributed in large quantities in Japan. The glass beads distributed at this time were called Group S3B, and most of them were made of drawing method, but there are also a certain number of made by segmented method. Another characteristic of that, there are many large pieces with a diameter of over 6 millimeters, and the color tone is almost exclusively cobalt blue. The distribution number is extremely large, with over 100,000 pieces currently known to have been excavated. Compared to the typical plant ash glass produced in West Asia, group S3B tend to have a higher potassium content. Plant ash glass with higher potassium content is believed to be characteristic of Central Asian origin. Looking outside of Japan, large quantities of the same type of glass beads were discovered in the territory of Silla on the Korean peninsula at around the same period, around the 5th century AD. At the time, glass vessels and gold ornaments of Central Asian origin were flowing into Silla via inland route, and it is likely that these glass beads were brought to East Asia with the same route. Interestingly, during this period, large quantities of jadeite beads, jade beads, especially jadeite beads from Japan, were brought to the Silla region. So there may have been an exchange trade between glass beads and jadeite beads, Japan, Korean peninsula. Then, at the end of the 6th century, a new type of plant ash glass, group S3C, appeared in Japan. Group S3C is small button-shaped beads with asymmetrical shapes on both ends, with one end being more rounded than the other. Cobalt blue is more common, but the color is diverse. A large number of this type of beads were excavated under the pagoda of Askadera Temple in Nara, which was built in 593. They contain relatively lower potassium, so they are typical Western Asian type of plant ash glass. The same type of glass beads have been found as far west as Uzbekistan, in Central Asia, and in northern China, especially northern Thosa dynasty, and in the territory of Baekje, in the southwestern part of Korean peninsula. In particular, Wanghunsa Temple, this one, Wanghunsa Temple is Baekje is said to be the predecessor of the Askadera Temple, and the strong relationship between the two temples has been suggested. And the relationship between Baekje and the northern dynasties of China also strengthened in the second half of the 6th century AD. So we believe that this international relation at this time suggests the distribution route of group S3C at the end of the 6th century. In other words, group S3C from Western Asia traded into East Asia via an inland route and was brought from the northern dynasty of China to Wanghunsa Temple in Baekje and then to Askadera Temple in Nara. At the beginning of the 7th century, a new influx of red glass beads began to flow into northern Kyushu. They were the last glass beads imported into ancient Japan. The first half of the 7th century overlapped with the period when red glass was being produced at the Iksan Wangunri site in Baekje in Korea. Lead isotope analysis was conducted on red glass beads distributed in northern Kyushu by the first half of the 7th century and on lead glass produced at the Iksan Wangunri site in Baekje in Korea. The results showed that the red isotope ratios of all samples plotted on a straight line known as the Baekje line. This means that red glass beads produced in Baekje had flowed into northern Kyushu in the first half of the 7th century. Then, Finally, in the second half of the 7th century, glass crucible with lead, extremely similar to those of Pekje, was discovered at the Asukaike site in Nara. Raw materials such as quartz and galena, lead ore, were also discovered at this, together with the crucibles. The results of lead isotope analysis on glass and galena excavated from the Asukaike site showed that they have the same isotope ratios as lead mines in Japan. And all of the lead glass from the second half of the 7th century onwards was made of domestic lead raw material. The spread of glass beads and glass-making techniques in the 7th century can be summarized as follows. First, in the early 7th century, lead glass beads made in Pekje in Korea were distributed mainly in northern Kyushu. Later, in the second half of the 7th century, with the fall of Pekje, Pekje craftsmen migrated to Asuka area in Nara, spreading glass-making technique and starting domestic production of domestic production of lead glass at Asukaike site. In the 8th century, domestic production of lead glass reached its heyday, while the influx of imported glass beads, which had been continued for over 1,000 years, stopped. In addition, glass beads had been previously used as ornaments to decorate people. They rapidly changed from 8th century onwards into ornaments to decorate Buddhist statues and temples. And then in the 9th century, production of glass beads itself declined, but the reason is unknown so far. The start of domestic glass production in 8th century meant that glass beads were no longer a valuable item transported from overseas across the sea, but something that could be produced domestically. In other words, the start of domestic glass production could be said to have marked the beginning of the end of the glass bead culture that had continued in Japan for more than 10,000 years. Thank you for attention.
Hi, Dr. Tamura. Thank you very much for the engaging, which provided a wealth of diverse data on concrete scientific analysis. Okay, the next presentation is Technological Transition and Innovation with Viking Beads by Dr. Ljungkvist from Uppsala University, Sweden.
Now you hear me. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here, and I'm learning very, very much. So it's already a very nice experience. So now we're moving to Scandinavia, and I will talk about beads from the late 6th century and onwards to the 10th century CE. And in this period, Scandinavia has a special position in Europe when it comes to beads, because especially in Western Europe, from the Mediterranean and Western Europe, we have the Christianization process that begins in the 6th century. And that means from in graves, they are not any longer furnishing the graves with objects. So the good bead compositions or the bead sets, they disappear. You only find them on settlements or rarely in depositions. So it's very hard to understand the chronology and have the good contexts of beads in the rest part of Europe. So Scandinavian beads is a mass material. We have tens of thousands of them in thousands of graves. So we can they are excellent to use to see trends in imports, in international contacts, and of course in fashion and to study human choices in what you want to wear, what you want to produce, and so on. So on this picture, you can see Scandinavia, southern parts of Scandinavia in related to other parts of Europe. So to the lower left side, we have some parts of England, moving rightwards to the Netherlands, northern Germany, and Poland. And above that, you have Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. That is Scandinavia. And you see a circle on the circle up in the upper part of the picture that shows that's middle Sweden. That's the core area for the picture I'm going to show with you. That's where you have our capital of Sweden, Stockholm. You have Uppsala University, where I come from, and so on. And that's one of the, it's a densely populated area, so it's one of those that where we have a very good grave material, not the least from the famous Viking town, Birka. And normally, the Viking Age is a period that normally is defined as from the late 8th century, around 800 CE to 1050, 1100. And, but actually, the Viking Age from a trade perspective and trading perspective and a societal perspective, it begins a couple of centuries earlier. It's the raiding that is specific for the Viking Age, the raiding to England and to Western Europe. But we can see a number of changes in the society in the late 6th century. And I will show you a couple of examples of these. And I think maybe there is some parallels to what happens in Japan and Southeast and eastern part of Asia in the same period, or about approximately the same period. One of these is the introduction of monumental burials. This is a LiDAR picture from old Uppsala, Gamla Uppsala, where I come from, where we have the first the introduction of really large monumental mounds that range between 70, 80 meters in diameter. It's the introduction of a royal dynasty being buried at the same place. It's an equivalent of Sutton Hoo that Simon showed pictures of earlier today. And this change, it's not only unique for Gamla Uppsala, it is something you see across Scandinavia and also, I think, in England at the same period. It's a very broad phenomenon. And on this picture, this is a still picture from a VR visualization project we did for Gamla Uppsala a few years ago. So you see on the lower part of the picture, you see some of the great mounds, and just adjacent to the large burials is the royal palace. So this is the introduction of the early kingdoms. So it's not a kingdom for Sweden, but it's the beginning of what we later see the consolidation of larger kingdoms of Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. And I can't show you the pointer now, but you have the self-focus point is the Great Royal Hall, built on a large artificial terrace, surrounded by workshops and economy, lots of smaller houses and so on. And it was surrounded by a very large village, up to 70 farms with a specialized economy. They're not proper farmers. They're sort of the court belonging to this ruling group. It's like the Edoras in Lord of the Rings movies, if you see the Two Towers movies. They've caught it pretty well, I think. And another change is that we see a transformation of the animal style ornaments in this period, where it transforms. We see the beginning of the art styles that we later see in the Viking Age. On this picture, you can see cutouts from ornaments from sword scabbards, from the single-edged swords, from the what we call the Vendel period, preceding Viking Age. You can also see a gilded horse harness mount with the characteristic style C ornaments. Maybe you can see the horses surrounded by the knotted ornaments on the big picture. And perhaps most important from a broader societal perspective is that we have major changes in the burial practice. In the earlier periods, from the Neolithic well into the Bronze Age and the Roman period, you cremate the persons on one spot, and you take out the bones, and you deposit the bones in a pottery urn or something like that in the ground. But from this period, they cremate the persons on spot, and they concentrate the cremated remains, and then they build a mound over it. And in addition, they also start to deposit animals in the graves. So that goes from the lower middle class, where they are accompanied, for example, with a dog and a sheep, to these elite burials where you have dozens of animals. You can have up to 3, 4, 5 horses, 10 pigs, 10 sheep, birds of prey, hunting falcons, fish, wild birds, and so on. 99% of the population is cremated, but we also have these boat burials. So this is a very good example to show the contents that were also present in the cremation graves, where you see the person surrounded by his weapon, covered by shields. In front of him is the helmet and the body armor packed in a very nice container, kitchen equipment in front of that, and you see the horses and the animals placed in front of the boat. So and the boat burial practice is also new for this period. It comes around 540, 550 CE. And we are approaching the beads, that we associate imports mostly with elites. And here you see an example of objects from from a number of different boat burials. And just to the right, you can see a glass beaker from the North Sea region. It's England, northern Belgium, France, perhaps Holland. Hard to pinpoint the exact origin. You see a helmet. For a helmet, I could specify that in Scandinavia, the only metal produced in Scandinavia was iron. So that meant all other metals, all glass was imported. So they were locally transformed. It was raw glass or raw copper or something like that. They were transformed in Scandinavia, but the raw material was imported. So you see the helmet here. It's an iron helmet with gold foils and casted parts that were, of course, imported because they were made of copper alloy. To the left, you can see a sword grip, one of the characteristic Vendel period swords. The hilt is made in copper alloy. It's gilded, fire gilded with gold and mercury. It has inlaid garnets from India and so on. But also, this is also a period where we see the world, the imports also in the middle class jewelry. So this, on the island of Gotland, I have fortunately more inhumation burials, means that the objects are not damaged by the cremation fire. So this is a middle class button on bow brooch. It's casted in copper alloy, but it's gilded with gold and mercury, fire gilded. You see the red garnet stones originating from India, and the white discs is mother of pearl. We find most likely, we have still not analyzed these ones, but they are very common. And if it is mother of pearl, which I'm almost 100% certain of, it must originate from a tropical shell. So it is most likely originating from the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean. So it goes hand in hand with the cowrie shells that we also find in Scandinavia at this point. So the world economy can also be seen in the middle class objects. From this point and onwards into the Viking Age. So here is a statistics from a yet unpublished article based on, I think, 300 something female graves dressed with beads, and the arrow shows where we have this transition where we have this general transition. And at this point, the number of beads increased by 1,000% in Scandinavia. So something is happening, and bead material is the best statistical tool we have to see these changes. So, and then when we move into the 7th century, the numbers multiply again. And from around 620, we can see how it goes up and down in certain phases, well into the Viking Age. So, so this is actually when the Viking Age begins from an import perspective. Connecting to the previous presentation, I was hearing about the red beads from the Korean graves was really a jaw dropper for me. So we must talk much more about that. But these are beads from around 600 AD, a mix of glass beads and shell beads, probably tropical. And this is the period where we also see bead production in Scandinavia. So it is not only a transition in the imports, it's also a transition in the technological knowledge in Scandinavia at this point. So at first the beads are very simply made. You take molten glass and wound it around an iron rod, and in that way you produce the beads. But after just 100 years, this technology has changed dramatically. They've become very good at producing beads. These examples, we have of course very few production sites. We have the best one is Ribe in Denmark, where and on this slide you can see an assortment of different types of beads and the raw materials and that we use to produce these beads. So they were very good at it. But something happens. Next major change is starts to emerge around 760 AD. We know that from Ribe because they have such a fantastic chronology. They can follow everything every 10 years or 20 years. They can see the changes. So when we have the Islamic expansion in the Middle East and Europe happening in the 7th century, and about 100 years later, we can see how the effect also on the economic side. So this is when we see the spread of Islamic silver coins to, it begins at this period, and also glass vessels and bronze, copper alloy vessels and so on. And the beads go hand in hand with this transition. So now I can't point really, but on the upper left side, you can see the different beads that I showed on the previous slides, those produced in Ribe. And to the right of that, you can see here the years. So here you can see the different phases. We can divide the bead fashion in 50-year intervals. In Scandinavia, it has been done by Johan Kalmer, who was the grand professor of bead studies in Scandinavia. He made this in the 1970s, and then it has evolved. Okay, going back. Upper left side, you see the domestically made beads, but to the right of that, in the late 700s, there is a mix. So the upper rows of beads are regional Scandinavian made, but the lower ones, there you can see the beginning of the introduction of beads from the Islamic period, the segmented beads, gold foil, silver foil beads, and other intricate beads. And then it continues, 800 to 850, we see total dominance of imported beads. It continues into continues for a while. In the late 800s, 850 to 900, we see a phase where there's a much stronger domestic production again. And then the next phase, we see still some domestically made, but also a large inflow of carnelian and rock crystal beads from India. So it's a very delicate and, in my opinion, very fascinating, complex picture of beads coming from different areas at different stages in the Scandinavian history. So now I will show some nicer pictures and so to present you with a general overview of how it changes. And all of these pictures are from the trading site of Birka outside Stockholm, where we have a very nice, on this place they buried a lot of persons in inhumation burials. That's very fortunate for us because they're not fire damaged. So here are a bead set from around 800. You can see on the top lots of silver foil, drawn silver foil beads. We do not know about the origin really because unfortunately we haven't made a lot of scientific analysis of them. And below that, a mix of beads, both imported and domestically made, but almost always comes from the Middle East. You see the green and yellow one with an eye has clear parallels to Egypt, for example. And here we have a very strong parallel to the previous presentation with the blue drawn beads. This grave is dated to around between 800 and 850. It's slightly later than the previous ones. And it's characterized by the graves contained a lot of beads. It could be up to 800 beads in the same graves. And but they are also very small at this period. Blue and white dominate. And hope you can see on the close-up that maybe you can see the drawn line. I made a close-up so hopefully you can see it. And as in the previous presentation, they're made exactly in the same way. They are drawn, they are cut up, and afterwards they are fire treated, but you can still see the cutting marks of them. And we had a researcher, Sunil Gupta, who has also been here in Japan studying beads 10-20 years ago. And he got extremely excited when he saw them. I learned a lot of him. So it was a real eye-opener for our understanding of the import of even simpler beads in Scandinavia. Normally we associate the complex beads with imports, but also the simpler beads have been imported in millions of examples. And here you see the next phase where we have a lot of domestic bead production, but also you see in the middle row we had the round carnelian beads originating from probably Gujarat in India. We do not know scientifically very much about the carnelian beads, but articles are appearing now where they are trying to identify the sources of these. And probably it's not as simple as only Gujarat, but that's our best bet at the moment. And then if you see Viking Age objects on an exhibition or on Google or something like that, most of the objects come from the early 10th century, because that's when the Viking Age, most objects are deposited, and we have chamber graves in Denmark and so on. That's the characteristic time of the Viking Age, and also where we have perhaps the most beautiful bead sets. And this is also from Birka, of course, the carnelian beads and the rock crystal beads, faceted and shaped in a very nice way. So, I'm moving on very fast. When it comes to reflections, I think there has been a lot of research done on beads from Scandinavia, but we still do not know much about their origin. And I think we're just in the beginning of understanding from which regions the different beads came. We have, for example, one type of bead called the Fustat beads. They were already in the 1940s recognized as being found both in Birka and in Fustat, that is present-day Cairo in Egypt. But then a lot of these different types, the results are, these interpretations, they are being reproduced, so that you reproduce them again and again and again, and that there has not been a really big research effort in really trying to understand the very many different origins of different kinds of beads. So that is definitely lies in the future. And in comparison with Japan and in the studies you have made here and in other parts of the world, we have only made a small amount of studies in Scandinavia on the origin of the glass mass of these beads. So a far lot more can be done and in this way to untangle the global contacts and so on. But perhaps the most fascinating things is to understand the fashion of beads and how they transform. Because most of the picture I've shown that shows bead sets from, you could say, the middle class, the broad fashion changes. But we can also see the individual choices that makes them even more fascinating. And that's, as usual in archaeology, we can see that most clearly in the real elite burials. And this is example, this is not from a grave, it's actually a hoard found in Lejre in Denmark, a royal center. So it probably belongs to a high-ranking female. And these persons and the other persons that I analyze, it's tricky analyzing a really rich female grave because you can't place the beads in the chronology. And that can be very frustrating if you want to date the grave. So it seems like these persons, they signal their identity or the power or the ritual or their ritual position via the beads. So they choose special beads. They can be very large, they can be extra complicated, they can be old. You can see if suddenly there's a 400-year-old bead in a bead set, and that is very confusing. So we can see the individual expressions and individual meanings with the beads. Oops. And we can also see regional differences. You see the circle on the map, that is the island of Gotland, placed outside east of the mainland of Sweden. And the Gotland people are the richest in the first millennium. You can when you want, they're always the richest, and that's probably because they were in a node. They were the mediators in trade, so they have very good contacts. Yeah, I think you see that in England as well. Isle of Wight is always very rich, for example, and they do it their own way. So you can, and it's very frustrating again if you want to date the graves, you want to make a chronology or something like that to fit it into a pattern, because you can do it in some ways, but the Gotlandic people does it their own way. So you have always these people that they do it their own way. They have their own expressions of their own regional identity. And you see the copper alloy pendants on these bead sets. They're also unique for Gotland. So, reflections. I think the beads are fascinating because we can use it's the best chronological tool we have. It's the best mass material for seeing trading changes, and it's also a tool where we can trace the technical innovation, but we can also see the choices, because it seems like Scandinavians could at some points, in comparison with Europe, where we can trace some beads contemporary with we have in Scandinavia in other parts of Europe, but the Scandinavians have not chosen the same beads at all times. So the beads reflect what human choices or societal choices. And sometimes they say, we don't want to do it like they do, we want to do it in our own way, even if the beads originate from India. So they come from India, they come to a distribution points, and at one point, they say we want these beads, but not these beads for our society. And they have imported millions of Indian beads or Mesopotamian beads, but they can still choose. I want that, not that. So I think that's a very good foundation for discussing societal changes and choices and minds and technology from many different angles. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Ljungkvist, thank you very much for the engaging presentation, which can be compared with case studies from Japan, East Asia, and other areas, utilizing various archaeological data and rich evidence. The next presentation is the final, the next is the final presentation. The title is Beads and Human Society, Perspectives from the History of Hokkaido by Kazunobu Ikeya from National Museum of Ethnology.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to this workshop. My name is Ikeya, National Museum of Ethnology. First, I would like to a brief introduction of my research. My research specializes in the ecological anthropology of African hunter-gatherers. I have recently published the book in English. The book is an ethnography of the Kalahari San living in the southern Africa, describing and analyzing the settlement of the people and the social change. I have conducted more than 20 years of fixed point research, mainly 2 years of living research in San camps and village, in combination with archive research. This book describes the persistence and the change in San society over the past 80 years. Meanwhile, I have been conducting comparative ethnographical research on beads for the world. I have edited 3 books. First, Beads of the World, Beads from the Perspective of Homo sapiens History, and Beads of the Ain. In this presentation, I would like to consider the state of human society through the beads of the Hokkaido, where the Ain people have lived. This slide shows an outline of my presentation. First, introduction, symbolic behavior of early human and beads. Second, theoretical framework, materials, technology, and social culture. Thirdly, Hokkaido beads history, 20,000 years of beads islands. First, beads from the Paleolithic Jomon and Ainu cultures. Second, Ainu beads in the Edo period. Third, Ainu beads from Meiji era to present. Lastly, summary and discussion. I would like to try integrate of the archaeology and history and also ethnography. In my presentation, we will discuss the relationship between human and beads by looking at the 20,000 years history of beads use in Hokkaido. I will also consider what cognitive ability were involved in each period. 2017, I had the opportunity to present an exhibition showcasing the beads from around the world. It was a special exhibition, beads connecting, concealing, and showing, at the National Museum of Ethnology in Osaka, Japan. The exhibition considers beads as material that are connected to each other and created an arrangement that allows visitors to travel around the world while viewing the beads from Oceania to Japan. Many visitors to this exhibition says the iron beads left the greatest impression on them. The size of the beads, the dark light blue beads, they were unique among beads from all over the world. I would like to show the iron beads. Iron beads are dividing into two types of the necklace, tamasai and shitoki. Tamasai is a necklace consisting of several glass beads connecting and tied together, while shitoki is a large decorated plate placed between the glass beads, and the decorative plate itself is sometimes called a shitoki. The shitoki is a thin circular object more than 10 centimeters in diameter, and it's often made of metal. In addition to two necklaces that has been handed down to the present, earring called ninkari can also be considered as beads. Let me now mention the research perspective of my presentation. In the exhibit of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in the United States, there is a panel showing the list of human innovations, including bees. Could you show the slide? Bees are created 100,000 years ago. On the other hand, human images are created 60,000 years ago, probably at the cognitive revolutions. This may indicate the hunter-gatherer ethnographic information is useful for understanding the symbolic behavior of early humans, although prehistory and archaeology can reveal the materials used and date the place of their use from the beads component. It would be difficult to determine how the beads were obtained, who wore them, and what role they played. Hunter-gatherer ethnography can provide a framework of understanding this. On the other hand, a book on the history of bees in the world was published in 1987. But since this bees of world chronology, please show the Italy. Italy is very famous for Venetian bees. It is a lot of the sampling. On the other hand, Japan, China, not so much. Not so much information in Hokkaido. I think Hokkaido, I'm wondering why this Hokkaido case not so contributes of this chronology. This is my motivation of my presentation. I think this presentation, iron bees introduce from iron bees from the perspective of the history of Homo sapiens. What kind of materials were used from Hokkaido from about 20,000 years go to the present, and how they are used. We would like to consider how the example of this report, my presentation, will contribute to the history of the bees in the world. Shortly, I would like to show the historical period in Hokkaido. I'm skip up the Honshu. Honshu is very famous, Jomon, Yayoi, Kofun. But in the Hokkaido is first is Paleolithic time is first, and Jomon and Epijomon and Ophotsukan Satsumon and Ainu culture period. Please to compare the two areas. This is my theoretical framework. I have already published the paper on the relationship between humankind and bees. Humanity bees can be understood from the three perspectives: materials, technology, and social culture. Material including shells, stones, ostrich eggshells, and glass. Technology include how the components are made and how the design are created. Social culture is what the bees are used for, such as decoration, group identity, and social status. This photo taken by me. I did the field work of the Kalahari, and also I want to observe of the making the ostrich shell bees. And also, I can point out bees product of two types. First one is linear shapes, and second one, the flat surface. Please show the photograph. I think that Cro-Magnon in the European. Please show what is the head. This is a flat surface. On the other hand, Japan, this is a Jomon people case. This is linear shapes. It is very contrast to West Europe and Eastern Asians. This is my interesting point. Well, I would like to Hokkaido case study, 20,000 years old bees island. First, Paleolithic time. Now we can show the distribution of the site from the continental part of the Northeast Asia to Hokkaido, Japan, where Paleolithic bees have been excavated. Here, well-known such as Denisova and Yana are found. And the number of the sites where bees are used in Hokkaido during the Paleolithic time is only 4 sites. During the Paleolithic period, were connected to the continent by land. Bees made of olivine, slate, and kohaku, not ivory, not animal bones, respectively, have been found from the times. The stone are inferred to have been transported from the original source tens of kilometers away, according to the recent research. In other words, a bees culture already exists in Hokkaido about 20,000. This is bees of the Paleolithic time in Hokkaido. This is Pilica site. Is made of the, this is slate beads. Next one, thousands of years ago, Jomon people lived in the southern part of Sakhalin and even part of the Kuril Islands, as well as Hokkaido. Bees from that time used a diverse range of materials, including jays and kohaku from Honshu and shells from the Hokkaido. At the time, jays production was limited to the Itoigawa area of Niigata Prefecture, and it is thought that it was transported Hokkaido by gift or exchange. This photo, made of shell beads, have survived in various forms at Funadomari sites on the island of Rebun in the late of Jomon period, approximately 3,500 years ago. It has been inferred shell flat beads were produced in large quantity at the site using the gate drills. That is probably due to acquisition of Binosuga muscles in the photograph. The main material used for flat beads and agate, the material used for drills. It also shows where on the human body the flat beads submerged in the tombs were decorated. Many of them were worn to the neck or both wrist of both. Since ancient and medieval times, Hokkaido beads culture has been very different from that of the Honshu. In the ancient Kinai NARA basin region, unique beads such as kudatama, these were made from agate and other stones. It is said that the head of the powerful family at the time wore them, and the beads were an indication of social hierarchy. Lastly, the use of the beads declines with the development of Ritsuryo system in Honshu. This photograph is very important one. Among these, numerous glass beads have been excavated at the site of Hokkaido from the 13th century to 18th centuries. At the same time, metal product made in mainland China, as well as swords and lacquer from Honshu were also excavated, indicating that the transit route from trades between mainland China and Honshu. Also, at this photo is Onikishibe site in East Hokkaido. The blue glass beads with Chinese coins and metal rings attached to them, probably the prototype of the shitoki. Shitoki is, I mentioned to the contemporary Ainu beads. This one used by Ainu today were excavated for the first time. In this photo, agate and glass beads and old coins were excavated from the tombs, along with bronze vessels, worked with brim, shame, and white metal plates. The remains are estimated to date to the 14th century. It is highly likely that there was worn by the chief of the region. It is inferred the glass beads were transported from Manchuria in China via Lower Amur River to Sakhalin Islands, and then to Hokkaido by trades. We can find out glass beads from 15th century to 17th centuries. They are colorful and small size. Please show this photograph. During the Edo time, Hokkaido was called Ezochi. At the time, the people living there were mainly Ainu. In the Edo period, not only archaeological date, but also colorful painting of the Ainu people's customs are still preserved, which are valuable even from the global perspective. This is a Hokkaido Ainu distribute, Karafuto Ainu, and also Chishima Ainu. And also, I want to show glass beads trade routes. Please show the three color. This red color shows the Japanese people trades. And also, I think this is blue color shows the Chinese. Yellow and green color is European. The European bees, please take care of the European, please not enter in Hokkaido. This is a map. In the 1972, Arai Hakuseki Ezoshi, a sketch of the Shitoki, this is Shitoki on your left side, with a metal decorated plate describes. This shows several coins combined into the beads of each color, such as yellow, red, gray, and white. On the coins, the characters of Kan-e Tsuho can be seen with a hole in them. In addition, although the beads are smaller than the coin, they are strung together with small beads of small size. The shitoki also shows a crest-like motif. That motif suggests Ainu preference. On your right side, this is a 1981 Matsumaeshi is a geographical journal describing the history, geography, costumes, customs, and product of the Ezo regions. This shitoki consists of the combination of light blue beads of different size and coins marked as copper coins. The beads are of one color, but the design is particularly striking with two rows of small beads. On the other hand, there are large and small green blue glass beads excavated on the Nuchigawa site in Yoichi town in the later half of 19th century. The middle one measuring about 1 centimeter in diameter. These two types of the glass beads are similar to the two types of the painting in terms of the combination of size, although the color are different. In the 1989 issue Retsuzo, a portrait of the Ainu women named Chikiri Ashikari reveals the appearance of Ainu costume and accoutrements. She was dressed in clothing believed to have been imported from China and wore two types of beads, one for the neck and the other for her ears. Please look at the painting. While mainly made of glass beads with a large number of the blue medium beads, she also combines coins with more than 10 folds and a single disc. We can making the illust is we can make by ourselves. Later, the end of the Edo period, the origin of the glass beads used by the Ainu changes from China to Honshu. These were glass beads and dragonfly beads produced in Edo and Osaka. In addition, it is said glass beads for the Ainu were also made in Matsumae, the only castle town in Hokkaido. These were inexpensive and produced in large quantity and distributed throughout Hokkaido. As a result, blue beads, please watching the blue beads, became prominent in individual glass beads, and so some beads can be found larger than 5 centimeters in diameter. This present of one of the Ainu beads that have been handed down to the present day. Number 3, Ainu beads and society from Meiji era to present. A characteristic feature of the beads from the period is that they became widely popular in Ainu society due to the large supply of glass beads that accompanies the development of glass beads production in Japan. Later, the value of Tamasai shitoki increases as a result of tourism in some Ainu community. A growing collecting fever among the collectors and demand from museums in various regions. Although we cannot date the beads, let us look at the role in Ainu society at the time. The necklace worn by Ainu women during ceremonial dress was mainly made of glass beads and called tamasai. The decorative plates attached to the bottom of the necklace is called shitoki. These were also obtained as trading good or in exchange of labor, and labor necklace with a large number of tamasai were a sign of wealth. Tamasai were also believed to have depositional power and were used to pray for healing for illness and easy childbirth. Tamasai was one of the treasure of women and was passed from mother to daughter. On the other hand, Ainu tamasai with shitoki was used for important religious ceremony, while those without shitoki were used to when dressed in full dress or for ordinary ceremonies. It was always worn by women when attending the marriage ceremonies. The tamasai was the first items in a bride's wardrobe, and it was serves as a talisman for women. In ordinary times, tamasai was placed to the lacquer box. It has been also said for if the string of tamasai were break to connection with rituals. Lastly, a summary and discussion. My presentation was an attempt to explore the former beauty and prayer of the people of Hokkaido and surrounding the area with a focus of Ainu beads. Therefore, the aim was to look at the history of beads over the period about 20,000 years. At the same time, to understanding the characteristic of Ainu beads from the viewpoint of the beads in the world. Hokkaido is said to have been connected to Eurasian continent by land about 20,000 years ago. It is a place in Japan where the first beads were discovered along with Okinawa. The material used were stone and kohaku. This is unique in that the Eurasian beads of the time were made of mammoth tusk and ostrich eggshells. Probably people who migrated from the continents or the bearer of the idea. Later, the Jomon period, a variety of the material were used depending on the region, along with shell from remote islands and nuts, animals tusk from island area, jade from Hokkaido and jasper beads in the Sakhalin were also introduced probably through trade. There is a no-Yayoi period in Hokkaido. This would be continuing Jomon period when agriculture was not introduced and hunting gathering continues. During the periods in the Yayoi period, south of Honshu, grass beads believed to have been made in overseas production centers were introduced, although not in a large quantity. The age of the grass in Hokkaido, later during the period of the Okhotsuku culture, grass beads from China were brought in from the Sakhalin areas. During this period, which roughly corresponds to the same period, not many beads were excavated, with the exception of the early beads. It was during the medieval period in Honshu that something similar to the current Ainu beads, the shitoki, was born. It corresponds with the Kamakura period in the 13th century at the time, during changings from the pit house to one-story house. Earthware making declines and iron pot became popular. This led to the spread of the grass beads. This period is known as the Age of the Ainu culture in Hokkaido archaeology. But it was also a time a new culture was created by the introduction of things from the north and such. I skip over the Edo period. I would like to considering of the positioning of Ainu beads in the world. I can make the this is a cultural map of the beads in the world. Please show the from A to F. The A is Ainu. Ainu is a characteristic grass material is very popular, and also line. Line is important to design of Ainu. I want to skip over the another B, C, D, E, F. We can classify this beads culture of the world. I want to mention to the Ainu characteristic of the Ainu beads. Please show the first one. First one is material use for beads. The Ainu beads differs from those of the other region in the rarely used European beads or shell such as the Takara muscle. The Ainu have formed their own culture while using beads from China and Japan. And also, second one is the method of obtaining beads. Ainu beads are similar to those of East and Southern Africa, North America, and Far East, that they were obtained through the exchange of natural resources, such as fur for grass beads. It is possible that beads made of the familiar natural material, such as plants, fruits, and shellfish, also exist in Ainu society in the past. Third one is a beads making technique. Ainu beads were mainly used for necklace, and beads were not sewn in the shoes or gloves. This is probably due to the existence of the embroidery culture. The coexistence of linear and embroidery in Ainu garment is a distinctive character of Ainu culture. Lastly, I would like to show the between bees and society. Although it was not possible to discuss bees in detail in cultural area, bees have a common meaning among the bees and other people. Regardless of region, bees have been used for a variety of reasons, including decoration, transmission from mother to daughter, prestige, good, and cultural identity. Ainu beads are unique in the world in that they are used to cover the skull of a bear placed on the altar during the Ainu bear sending ceremony. This is a clear indication of the relationship between Ainu people and animals, including the fact that Ainu people consider the bear to be a kamui. This is mountain dwelling good. Last slide. In the recent years, there has been a new trend in Ainu beads making. New tradition beads created throughout the province, including the people using the plants and trees and components and beads embroidery. Among them, the udon, this photograph, udon, a spider sculpture by Toru Kaizawa, exhibited the National Ainu Museum in the museums. This is unique in the history of the maybe world bees histories. I think that we can see how the Ainu people's feeling towards bees varies with times in Hokkaido and its surrounding areas. And at the same time, we can obtain hint for thinking about the relationship between human and bees across times. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for the engaging presentation on the Ainu cultural history regarding the bees presented in broad global perspectives. Excuse me, they are all. At the time, we'd like to proceed with the general discussion at last. I believe we have explored a variety of presentations that encompass a broad range of perspectives and methodologies, from scientific analysis to cultural histories. However, there are certain points and topics that can be shared and exchanged among the presenters. Thus, I'd like to leave it to all contributors. Firstly, and Professor Matsumoto or Professor Kena, could you give me any comments and questions to all?
Okay, then I'd like to start with a comment. And I think everyone has many questions or comments that you want to ask. We have only, about 40 minutes, and it's not too much. So maybe we need to continue our discussion after this conference. But I'd like to just give a quick comment about the meaning or importance of beads. I think that there is a kind of general trend in the material used for beads in human history. It started with shells, then bones and talons. I think there are some stone used for Paleolithic, but most of the material used for Paleolithic beads were taken from other living creatures. And then there came the age of stones. And it's quite interesting that green stones and some blue stones were their favorites. And then when people started to produce glass, maybe the color preference toward green or blue had some influence on the glass color. But the glass as a material have a potential to produce various colors of beads. And then people started to experiment with some, chemicals, and they started to produce yellow, red, various colors. So I think the history of bees are a very good evidence of the relationship between people and material. And I'd like to hear some comments from you about the meaning of this trend of the material change. And I also thought that maybe bees was the first evidence of kind of global distribution. Now it is common that, the Swedish people and Japanese people have the same brand of handbag or, same computer, that kind of things. But maybe glass beads was the first material which was shared by Japanese people, and the Vikings. They all had kind of glass beads produced in Mesopotamia or South Asia. And I'd really like to know if they were, or how they were conscious about this global distribution of bees. And John talked about the kind of conscious selection or preference of those bees. And so now we know the kind of width of the world, or the world map through kind of computer or SNS. But is there a possibility that those strings of grass bees originated from different part of the world was a kind of material component of the past people's consciousness about the width of the world, or geographical kind of span of the world? And I'd like to hear your kind of opinion about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matsumoto Sensei. I'd like to start by saying what an amazing set of papers we've had. I've learned a huge amount. It's been really fascinating. And I think that taking beads as maybe one focus, but also with Professor Ryan's presentation on iron as well, thinking about that sort of that crossover between beads and technology, I think is actually really interesting. We've heard a range of technologies from shell through, as you said, to stone, through to metal, through to glass. And I think there are some really interesting themes to think about in there, in the way that these technologies spread, in the way that there's innovation, who's adopting these new technologies, and the way that's happening. We've talked a lot about trade, as if these things are being traded around. And trade is one of the concepts that I have a bit of a problem with, especially in some of the earlier periods, because I was reading a paper on the plane over by Mark Hudson and a bunch of people over in Europe, looking at maritime networks and wondering how these things worked. How did those networks actually operate? And I think this is something that we've sort of looked at, isn't it, a lot with our NARA to NORWICH project. So what is the nature of those networks? And I think especially from the early medieval Scandinavian world, we assume that there's some kind of connections going on there, and so there's work to be done, I think, to understand how those networks are really working. I've thought some of the discussions around aesthetics and heirlooms has been really interesting, and there are some very specific archaeological questions in there, which I think touches on what you're just saying, Naoko, about these assemblages of beads that we're seeing. How are they put together? Who's deciding that they're going together or not? One of the books I enjoyed reading a lot when I was doing my PhD was called The Domestication of the Human Species by E.O. Wilson. And he talks about sort of how display and ornamentation is central to being human. And I think many of the things we've been talking about today really sort of focus in on that. But there's one other element to that, which is that beads are very small. And Matsumoto-sensei, you were saying you're doing work on Dogu, the Jomon figurines. I've done work on Dogu as well. One of the things, it's the power of those very small objects. And not only are they small to look at, but making such small objects and all the detail, working shell, I imagine there's an awful lot of shells where you go and you've broken it, having spent ages trying to drill your little hole in it. And some of the shell, the tubular shells the tubular beads that you were showing us, Tamura-san, for example, they're tiny, and the work involved in drilling out the holes, that's one of the things that's always really, who's doing that? Who's got the eyesight to do that? Under what circumstances are they actually doing that? And that sort of brings me to one of the questions about the production of these things. We've not only got networks of exchange, but we've got the production of these objects. And I thought, listening to Ikeya Sensei's presentation, I thought, so amongst the Ainu, who's producing all of this stuff? And in archaeology, of course, we hear a lot about craft specialization. And there's been, work, Gina Barnes has done a lot of work looking at bead production in Japan in particular, those jadeite sources that you talked about. And I think there's some interesting themes in there that we could be having a look at as well. But just lastly, I think when we were doing our NARA to Norwich project and taking some of our English early medieval specialists who hadn't really looked outside England very much before, and the surprise when in Korea, I remember actually most clearly, where we found gold and garnet, so garnet stones, being used in exactly the same way that they're used in early medieval England. And I thought the power of these things still today to surprise or even shock, actually, is really interesting. And just to finish off on that, I know one of the most popular activities in Japanese museums, if you're sort of to get an experiential approach, is to get people to make beads, to get people to make magatama beads. And you can buy sets to make your own magatama beads. And I'm rather intrigued as to why that's so appealing. Even today, and maybe some of the things that we've been touching on today could draw on that. Thank you. Should we just pass the mic around, and if anybody has any comments on what we've been hearing, or questions or responses to any of the questions that have been arising, I think that would be really helpful. Susan, would you like to?
I'll make some comments, yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I've learned a lot, and I want to follow up with lots of you. One thing I'm always interested in all the work I do, is that being wary of binaries, of dividing things into, two camps, humans and others, or whatever. And just something that came up in this when we're talking about routes of trade and transmission is that this is a network of routes which go by land, sea, and river at different times. And, I think often people talk about the maritime routes, but I think that's one of those distinctions that's perhaps not that helpful, because maritime routes always link up to river routes, and then they always link to land routes. So they're not, and they change over time. But another binary that has come across in this is the decoration of humans, and you talk about domestication of humans. But I think it's interesting to look at beads when we're looking at animals as well, beyond non-human animals. We've seen the bear headdress used in the Ainu, but also, of course, we see beads used a lot in horse decoration of tack and in other decoration of animals. So I think it's another avenue we can look at to stop that hard line between animals and non-human animals and humans. But another binary which has come up, which has just brought up an old question in my head, is that, of course, we're talking about blue and green, lapis and jade. And blue and green is one of those color spectrums that attach attracts a lot of interest because a lot of different cultures name blue and green differently, or perhaps don't see blue and green, the differentiation between them differently. And I was struck because when Professor Ryan gave his presentation, every time he said the green on this, I saw blue. And every time he saw the blue on this, I saw green. And we just tested this. And I don't know whether it's a fact of him being in Japan, because as in China, you have Qing in China. What is it? This word for green, blue.
In Japanese.
Yeah. Are we? Yeah. Yes, it's Qing. It's Chinese Qing. But it's sort of natural color, which is blue and green, and it's in all societies. This is, you know, a big issue, is the differentiation. And I never thought of lapis and jade in that way, because maybe there comes, because jade, of course, we think of that light green, but jade goes from everything from white to black. I mean, it's, you know, a big spectrum of colors. So maybe there was a bit more of a lack of a differentiation between those colors than I've been thinking about. I should say we did this because I went over and tested Professor Ryan, and he saw everything that was blue, I saw as green, and vice versa. And I do think maybe it's your being in Japan a long time, we've got different cultural sensibilities of those colors. But I also think it's an interesting point to consider. So, lots of other things I could say, but I'm going to hand over.
Thank you. Yes, what I realize is in Paleolithic period there is like yes, trade. We can find it in shells. We can find it also in lithics, in shoes of flint, and that travel 200 or more kilometers. But here, for the period that you're talking about, it's thousands of kilometers. So it's really show the changing of the world and the changing of this huge exchange for cultures. What strikes me also is about the color. Yeah, in Paleolithic, we see that in cave art, but also, as I said, maybe on shells and on object, we have evidence of the red color, which is really important. And we have a lot in settlements too, during excavation for Magdalenian or Gravettian or Aurignacian. So all the upper Paleolithic, they use a lot of the red color. In burial too, but also in daily life. So red, yellow, maybe white and black either, but no blue, no green at that time. Maybe the color was not available in natural elements, or maybe it was on elements that are not preserved, but not in cave, not in objects. So it's totally another coloring world. About shell, I just want to say it's there is choose also in shells. With all the shells available, they choose some species of them for Paleolithic period. And it's really different on the shells that are appreciated now, for example, in France, when people just pick up some shells on the beach, they don't choose the same one. There is specific at that time for Paleolithic period. It's quite the same, all the upper Paleolithic, but yeah, there is some choose. And also sometimes it's, yes, it's really interesting what you say, like it's from living creature, animals, or it's not always the case. Sometimes it's like stones or different kind of stones, or sometimes the shell are fossil. Depends of the availability, maybe, of the area. But yes, the most of the time, yes. And maybe there were a meaning for them to wear that kind of animal teeth. We can't know, of course, the meaning for that. Because, for example, the fox canine are found sometimes 250 in a belt for the teenager. So it's really often on children. So it was not like the big hunter. It was maybe another meaning, maybe to preserve them or something else. So at Paleolithic and then other period, what I look forward for the following of all this discussion is in cultural meanings for women, men, the hierarchy. You said a little bit about the difference between people and what they're wearing, kind of beads. Because adornment is also an expression of matrimonial or richness or the status of the individual or the age. So it's really interesting when you have enough data to go that far in cultural people, where they live. And to finish, you said the beads were really small objects. And maybe that's why also they travel so easily. And we could have evidence so far away. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, there's very much to think about, and one of the learning from the other presentation, I think there's a lot of future research necessary to see if, for example, the beads, are they really the same beads going to Japan or to Scandinavia, and that requires scientific analysis for the future. There's also I thought about the trade issue, and that is extremely interesting, because I think we have both beads are part of the mass material, the industrial production, going millions of beads going different direction, and then it's also, then there are these deviations, and they can become deviations by age because they are reused. Eventually they become a very special heirloom. So when is an object part of a general trend because she has an iPhone, so I should have an iPhone? Or when does the story change? When does it become a curiosity with a story behind it? And that's I think that are very challenging questions, and we tend to forget small deviations. Either we talk only about the deviations, or we talk only about the big trends, and to meet in the middle of that and see the transformation from being a trend to a storytelling object. I think it's a real challenge for the future.
I'm so interested in color of glass beads, and East Asia, blue glass beads we prefer than other colors. I don't know why. It's difficult to say from archaeological evidence. But in India, cobalt blue glass beads and common, and red glass also common. But in Japan, cobalt blue glass coming from India, but not so much red glass. And in Kofun period, and around the 5th or 6th century AD, some people had red glass, but the people having the red opaque glass beads are not so high class people, middle class. And on the other hand, orange and yellow and greenish yellow color beads of higher class. I don't know why. And blue glass is ordinary, much ordinary. And in China, transparent material, they do not prefer. They prefer opaque or smoky material like stone, jade. They like jade very much. So they made red glass and red barium glass similar to the jade. So red barium glass color is smoky green and like jadeite. So in Japan also the red barium glass is blue, greenish blue, opaque. So I'm very interested in the glass piece, and but it is difficult to know how old ancient people think the color. Difficult, so I want to ask something. So the people, how why the color, why the blue color, why Ainu people like blue color? Do you know? Do you think? Ikeya sensei.
I would like to reply of the Matsumoto-san and Simon Kane-san comment. First one, a preference of the color, but not only color and size is also important, because European Venetian beads prefer to small size, not the big one. It is very easy to the more mental decoration of the Venetian beads. But if it's a big size, it's only necklace, not another purpose. I think the preference, I research of a lot of the ethnic group all over the world, which color is preferred to of the beads. It is very difficult to generalize of the, for example, today, blue is, lapis lazuli, and also blue galas is preferred Afghanistan, some Ainu, and some areas, but not so much East Africa, pastoralist something. Because of, for example, Maasai people to like to red one also. It is a differentiation of the, according to the ethnic preference, maybe cultures. For example, Ainu is like blue, but take care of the which area Ainu is preferred. Because my presentation is for the several hundred years. It's a differentiation of the color of the preference of the same peoples. Only the Ainu equal blue color, Maasai is red. This is very dangerous to fix up. For example, I study of the Africa, Kalahari people. Kalahari people is, I can historical photograph. Most of the people to ostrich eggshells. This is maybe long history, since maybe Paleolithic times, ostrich. But past about 20, 30 years ago, glass beads is introduced to this area. We can change very easily from the white color to a lot of the variation of the colors. I guess glass beads is, it is one of the revolution beads of the human history. For example, African case, people, European people to go to the maybe colonial time, before colonial time, go to the South Africa to exchange the koi beads or ivories. Maybe koi first time of the new colors of the past, I think. And also, you know, some Western Africa, no, Central Africa, some beads is exchange of the slave. This is very big issue of the trading. A lot of the type of the trade system in the world. This is very important point. Secondly, I would like to reply of the Simon Kane sensei. What kind of attractive of the beads? This is very important question because superficial, very important. I guess my connection is a very important keyword of the beads. According to the scales, if family scales, for example, Japan, pearl beads is transit from the mother to the daughters. Ainu glass beads, tamasai, also to mother to the child. And also maybe regionally also trading, hunter-gatherer and farmers. One is the beads, one is the items of the exchange good. This is a regional scales. And also continental levels, maybe some specific beads of Venetian beads, Bohemian beads, maybe Indian beads, Chinese beads. This is close to the continent. A lot of the scaling, beads is good adapting of the human society. I think the human, Homo sapiens is good for adaptation. A lot of the diverse environment. Beads also good adaptation of the human lifestyle, changing from the past to the present. Maybe beads is a continuity of the beads culture is important aspect of the this maybe this symposium, these workshops. It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you again for everyone's wonderful presentations. I learned a lot as well. As the only iron person, I also feel a little on the edge, but one thing I was particularly struck with was something that Professor Gaynor already mentioned, but the power of small things. And one connection between iron and beads that I felt was, particularly during the Kofun period, you have very complex shapes of arrowheads that are very distinct shapes, very different, but they're also very small. They're only 2 centimeters or 3 centimeters at the largest, but they are believed to represent different groups or social identities, and they were prized for being physical manifestations of those social relationships, which can also tie into the beads, which obviously doesn't need any explanation. That's been talked about enough today, but that is the power of small things. And I haven't quite understood yet, in my own way, how small things can have that power, or how they can act as, well, just for the simple fact that they're difficult to see. But maybe it's because they're difficult to see that they pack that punch, I don't know. But just that kind of relationship between small, and maybe it's they're just so dense with information perhaps, but that power of the small thing, and that transcends different materials, that's something that I took away from today's presentations.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for very intriguing questions and comments. And I think we've come up with several very kind of essential concepts, like power of small things and maybe adaptive ability of bees, So I think we need to develop the topics we have come up with in this workshop in the future. And thank you very much. And I just come up with an idea that maybe, beads don't usually used in one piece, but, they are usually used in numbers, tied together. And I wonder whether people had a kind of analogical thinking about, it's similar to human society, people can't exist by one person, but when people are tied together in a society, it can work together. And I don't know whether those ancient people who tied up those ivory or glass beads together came up with such an idea that these small things, each piece has their own kind of biography. You know, it came from mammoth, or it came from the sea, or it came from Mesopotamia or in India. And I'm really interested in how people were thinking about when they collected and tied them up together to make one kind of ornament. And I think that we can make a very good team to pursue this kind of questions in the future. Thank you. And please give a final closing comment, Professor Simon.
Oh my goodness, always the hardest thing to do after such an interesting day. Okay, well, the final point that I would make is that one of the things that interests me with when we're working with so much material culture is that we tend to focus on the really good examples. And I've done some work on early pottery, and one of the things that always surprises me about early ceramics is that they're already beautifully made. And it reminds me of the Paleolithic cave art. If you look at the cave art of Chauvet, which is the earliest art that we've got, those images they could be made by people today. And I think one of the things about beads, perhaps, is that perhaps we look back to 100,000 years ago, and those people, they had language, so they must have had names for these things. And so maybe across all of those millennia, we've got a shared understanding of what that material culture is. And I think there's a link there, perhaps, with the Materia-Mind project. And maybe the power of things, I think, relates to some of the work that we've been doing, Susan, on religion. And so, for example, when Buddhism and Christianity arrive, beads take on, and the materials from which those beads are made take on a very particular set of significances and affordances. They can do things for you. And that's the power that they have. And I think that would be very interesting to explore further as well. But just as a final comment, just really to thank everybody who's listening online as well for putting up with us all afternoon, to thank Onishi Sensei for coming to England last year and coming up with this great idea. And to say that from our perspective, from our NARA to Norwich or Japan and the Maritime Silk Road project perspective, we would be delighted to continue to work with the Materia-Mind project and developing more interdisciplinary approaches to these really key questions. But thank you very much, and thank you, Matsumoto Sensei, for facilitating all of this and for making us feel very welcome, and our interpreters, and also to all of our colleagues here in OKAYAMA for helping us out. So, Sam, thank you very much for making our visit so very easy and enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the two professors. I don't need to ask the closing remark because you already give us. Yeah, anyway, thank you very much for attending today. On behalf of one of our co-organizers, I'd like to express my appreciation to all the contributors and the visitors once again. Anyway, thank you so much.
通訳の、三宅さん、藤田さん、どうもありがとうございました。すいません、ちょっと最後のディスカッション、みんな早口だったかもしれません。どうもありがとうございました。カンファレンスの方はこれで終了いたします。